The scanner said the docking spine was empty, and Ren's Sable said it wasn't. Dr. Vale watched the human tilt her head half a degree, the way a listening animal did before it decided which direction to run, and he felt the old professional discomfort of an instrument disagreeing with a patient. The medical bay's long window showed the third pier of Halkut Reach washed flat and pale under the noon sun, gantries throwing hard shadows across the apron, a fuel sledge crawling between two parked lighters. Nothing moved on the far cradle. The board above the pier read vacant in the authorities' clean blue glyphs. "Something is charging out on Cradle 9, Ren said. She did not raise her voice. She never did. Coiled drive. It's about a third up the winding." Vale's 4 hands were busy at the tray, coiling the last of the regeneration leads, and he did not stop them. He had learned in 30 years of acoustic medicine that a patient who names a fault the machine cannot find is usually describing their own healing, the tinnitus of new nerves, the phantom chimes of a repaired cochlea singing to itself. He had told her this. He had told her a dozen times in the 4 weeks since the accident, since the pressure door had crushed her against the coupling and taken most of her hearing with it, since he had grown the fine cilia back thread by thread and woken something in her he had not intended to wake. "The cradle is empty, Ren. It's empty because they haven't lit yet." She was looking at the window but not at anything on it. Her eyes had the loose, unfocused softness of someone reading a page held very close. "You'll see it in about 90 seconds, maybe less. They're in a hurry." He should have kept coiling the leads. Instead, he set them down. Selene hearing was finer than most of the species that passed through the reach, and it was why his people had built the trade in ears and cochlear grafts and nerve song that had eventually deposited him, licensed and unremarkable, on this dust-choked frontier port. He heard the bay's air handlers, the tick of the cooling regenerator, the low civic drone of the station's grav plating. He heard, if he strained, the fuel sledge outside. He did not hear a coil drive on Cradle 9, because a coil drive that had not yet ignited made no sound a Selene could parse. It made no sound anything in the catalog could parse. That was the entire principle of the coil. It built its charge in silence, in a winding of superconductor that gave off nothing but a whisper of displaced field, and then it lit all at once, and the first anyone knew of it was the drive already burning. That was why raiders used them. "Ren," he came around the table, "how much charge?" "Half now." A pause, her jaw shifted. "The winding hums when it fills, higher as it goes, like a wire pulled tighter." She frowned, and it was the frown of someone doing arithmetic they resented. "There's 2 of them. The second one's behind it, further out, cold still, just the ones charging." "2." Vale went to the wall panel and keyed the pier feed, not because he believed her but because he had spent 4 weeks failing to prove her wrong, and the failures had started to accumulate into something that was not quite belief and was no longer quite doubt. The feed came up. Cradle 9 empty. Cradle 10 beyond it empty. The blue glyph vacant. "There's nothing there," he said, and hated how much he wanted it to be true. "There will be," she said, "in about 40 seconds. He counted them. He was not proud of it, but he counted them, one hand flat against the cold panel, watching the empty cradle, and at 19 the feed's edge lit white in a lighter that had been drifting in on cold jets. Dark, unpowered, a shape the traffic net had tagged as debris and ignored, dropped its masking and burned. The coil drive came up all at once, exactly as coils did. A hard blue lance against the pale sky, and the pier alarm started a half-second later because the pier alarms could only see the fire, and the fire was the last thing to arrive. Ren was already looking somewhere else. "The second one's charging now," she said. It waited for the first to commit. Vale did not move for a moment. On the feed, the first lighter slewed hard over Cradle 9, and its belly opened, and it was not a lighter at all. It was a runner, low and ugly and fast, and it dropped 4 dark shapes onto the apron that unfolded into the loping, chitin-plated bulk of boarders before the pier's own guns had finished traversing. The authorities' response was competent and far too late. It was always too late against coils. Everyone in the frontier trade knew that the first warning of a coil raid was the raid. Except this human had given him 40 seconds. "Doctor," Ren said, and now for the first time something moved under the flatness of her voice, not fear. He would learn she did not do fear the way his people did, but a kind of grim attention. The second one's aimed at the medical spine. "This one. It's going to light in about a minute, and it's coming here because the runner told it the guns are all pointed the other way." He looked at her. Small, dun-skinned, a smear of regenerator gel still drying at her jaw, her dark hair cut short, and uneven the way the cargo crews cut it themselves with shears. A faint pink scratch along one cheekbone from the accident that had brought her to him. Nothing about her broadcast danger. That was the thing he would spend the next months failing to explain to the authority, to the licensure board, to the cephalopod provost who would eventually try to put her in a box. Nothing about her broadcast danger, and that was precisely the danger. "Then we should not be here in a minute," Vale said. "No," she agreed. "We shouldn't." The second coil lit on schedule. The runner came in over the medical spine 61 seconds after Ren Sable named it, and by then Dr. Vale had the bay evacuated, 12 patients, 3 techs, 1 grafting rig he refused to leave and had to be pried away from down the maintenance stair to the pressure shelter under Pier 3, and the human had done it without hurry and without raising her voice, which was somehow more frightening to the patients than shouting would have been. She simply told them where the fire would land and how long they had, and she was right, and being right in a calm voice made them move. The coil's exhaust washed the medical spine's outer skin and blew the long window into the bay they had left 90 seconds before. Vale felt it through the deck, a hard, flat shove, and heard it a heartbeat later and thought. She heard that before it existed. She heard the wire pulling tight. In the shelter, packed in with the patients and the smell of scorched insulation leaking down the stair, the provost's people found them. There were 2 of them, authority security in the pale blue of the Meridian Concord, and their officer was a cephalopod, a saith, mottled gray, the skin along her mantle shifting slow patterns of unease that she probably believed her helmet hid. Her name strip read CEYLE. She moved the way the saith moved on a station, upright in a pressure rig that held her tentacular lower body in a column, her upper arms free, her eyes the flat gold of a species that had evolved in deep water and never entirely trusted the light. The medical bay called an evacuation 11 seconds before the strike, Provost Sale said. Her translated voice came out even and cold and precise. She was looking at Vale, but her eyes kept sliding to the human beside him. The pier net registered the coil at ignition. 11 seconds is not a warning. It is a coincidence. Who called the evacuation? "I did," Vale said. "On what basis, doctor?" He opened his mouth to lie, and Ren said, "On mine." Sale's mantle went still. In the saith, Vale knew absolute stillness of the skin was not calm. It was the opposite. It was a predator's freeze. "Explain," the provost said. "I heard the drives charging," Ren said. She said it the way she said everything, like a woman reading a manifest. Both of them. The runner on Cradle 9 started winding its coil about 100 seconds before it lit. The second one held cold until the first committed, then it charged and came in on the medical spine. I told the doctor. He moved everyone, that's all. "You heard," Sale repeated, "a coil drive charge. The winding hums when it fills. It climbs as the charge climbs. Yours does too, your rig, the actuators in the legs, they sit at a steady note. That runner's coil went from nothing to ignition in a rising tone I could set a clock by." Ren shrugged, a small human motion the provost's translator could not render, and her eyes clearly could not read. "I've been hearing it for 4 weeks. Nobody believed me either." For a long moment the shelter was quiet, except for the drip of something down the stair, and the low breathing of frightened patients. "That is not possible," Provost Sale said, "for any species in the Concord." "She's not in the Concord," Vale said, and the provost's gold eyes came to him and held. "She's from Earth." He watched the word land. He had watched it land on a dozen frontier officers, and he never tired of the small recalibration behind the eyes, the flick to some inner catalog, the pause on the entry, the reflexive checking of the hazard grade. The Meridian Survey had logged Earth 80 years ago as grade 16, hazard name Clamor, and appended a note that Vale had read once and never forgotten: a world of continuous acoustic violence. Native fauna navigate, hunt, and evade by sound across a range no civilized instrument tolerates. Contact discouraged, colonization unadvised. The surveyors had not meant it as a compliment. They had meant it as a warning, and like most Concord warnings about humans, it had been filed and forgotten, and was now standing in a pressure shelter with a smear of gel on its jaw, having just saved 12 lives with its ears. "Grade 16, Sale said slowly. Her skin had begun to move again, faster now. "Clamor." "That's us," Wren said. "Loud planet." They kept her after that. Not roughly. The authority did not need to be rough, not on a frontier port where the alternative to the authority was the VER. But they kept her. Provost Sale installed Wren Sable in a debrief suite with a soft chair and a view of the daylit apron and a security tech who logged everything she said, and for 2 days they asked her to listen. Vale was permitted to attend, in his capacity as her physician, which was the only leverage he had, and he used it without shame. He sat against the wall of the debrief suite and watched the authority try to turn a survivor into an instrument, and he watched the human refuse to be turned, not by fighting them. She never fought them, but by remaining stubbornly a person who happened to hear. "The vessel on approach vector 4, the tech would say. "Tell us its drive state." "Chemical thrusters throttled low. It's a freighter. It's been coasting for an hour. They just bumped it to hold station." Wren would not even look up. "The one behind it, though, that's a coil, and it's about a quarter charged, and it's been a quarter charged for 20 minutes, which means it's a patrol boat sitting ready, not a threat. You keep them charged so you can light fast. It hums lower when it's holding than when it's climbing." The tech checked. The tech was always checking, and the freighter was a freighter and the patrol boat was a patrol boat holding a quarter charge. And after the 4th or 5th time the tech stopped saying that is not possible and started, instead, to go very quiet, the way people go quiet when a thing they have decided to disbelieve keeps declining to be false. Provost Sale came on the 2nd day, and dismissed the tech and sat across from Wren, with her tentacles folded into their column and her gold eyes steady. "You understand what you are," the provost said. "I'm a cargo hand with good ears," Wren said. "I understand that." "You are an early warning array that fits in a chair," Sale said. "You detected 2 coil drives before ignition. Do you comprehend that the entire defensive posture of this Concord is built on the fact that a coil drive cannot be detected before ignition? Our doctrine, our patrol spacing, our insurance actuarials, the price of a berth at this port, all of it rests on the assumption that the coil is silent until it burns. You have just told me the coil is not silent. You have told me it is merely quiet in a register no one thought to listen to." "I didn't tell you anything," Wren said. "Physics did, I just heard it." "That distinction," said Provost Sale, "is going to matter to a great many people, and not one of them is going to care what you meant." Vale did not like the provost. He would come, over the weeks, to a wary and complicated respect for her, because she was that rarest of authority creatures, an officer who understood the size of the thing in front of her. But he did not like her, and he liked her least in that moment, because she had said aloud the thing Vale had been trying not to think since the coil lit on Cradle 9. The authority could not unknow what Wren Sable could do. And a frontier full of things that hunted with silent drives had just learned that silence was a lie a human could see through. The only question was whether they would let the human keep her own ears, or take them. The licensure board reached Halkut Reach 4 days later, which told Vale everything about how seriously the Concord was taking this, because the licensure board did not travel. The board existed to certify grafts and revoke the credentials of physicians who cut corners, and it conducted its business by remote and by proxy across 100 frontier ports without ever leaving the comfort of the Corps. That 2 of its adjudicators had boarded a fast courier and burned 9 days out to a grade 16 backwater meant the machinery of the Concord had felt the ground shift. They came to his bay. They did not summon him. They came to him, which was its own kind of message, and they stood among his grafting rigs in their soft gray robes and asked him, with exquisite politeness, to explain how he had performed an unlicensed sensory augmentation on a Clamor World native. I performed a licensed regeneration, Vale said. Cochlear reconstruction, Seleni technique, filed under my credential 4 weeks ago. You have the record. We have the record, the senior adjudicator agreed. Her name was Osmi. She was a 4-armed scholar caste, precise and dry, the kind of intelligence that had never once in its life been outdoors after dark. The record describes a reconstruction to baseline. The patient is not at baseline. The patient is substantially above baseline. Above, in fact, any documented sensory ceiling for a graft of this class. You will understand that the board's interest is in the discrepancy. There is no discrepancy, Vale said. I rebuilt her cochlea to a human baseline. The discrepancy is that the human baseline is not the baseline you catalog, because you have never grafted a human before because your survey graded her world unfit for contact and closed the file. He heard his own voice climbing and pulled it down because Seleni physicians did not climb. I did not enhance her adjudicator. I healed her. She could always hear this. She could hear it before the door crushed her. I gave her back what her own world gave her, and her own world is louder than anything you have ever built to certify. Adjudicator Osmi considered this with all 4 of her hands folded. That is a defense, she said, which happens also to be the most alarming thing you could have told us. If the augmentation were an artifact of your technique, we could revoke your credential and contain it. If it is native, if any Clamor World human, correctly healed, hears what she hears, she did not finish. She did not need to. Vale watched the scholar's mind walk the same corridor his had walked and arrive at the same locked door. Then it isn't a graft you can revoke, he said quietly. It's a species. Wren, told that evening that the board was minded to classify her as a controlled sensory asset of the Meridian Concord, listened to the whole recitation without expression, finished the ration she was eating, a dense gray frontier loaf she had learned to tolerate, and said, "No." "It is not a request," the security tech said. "I know," Wren said, "it's still no." Vale, watching from the wall, felt something he had not expected to feel on behalf of a patient, which was hope, because she had not raised her voice. She had not stood. She had not made a fist. She had simply eaten her bad bread and declined to be owned, and in the flat quiet of that refusal was something the authority did not know how to grip. You could threaten a person who argued. You could break a person who begged. Wren Sable did neither. She just heard you and disagreed and went on hearing. "You will reconsider," said Provost Sale from the doorway, where she had been standing longer than any of them had known, "when the Ver come back. And they will come back, Miss Sable. They came for the medical stores and they left with nothing because you emptied the bay. That is an insult a raider clan does not forgive. They will come back, and next time they will come with more than 2 coils, and when they do, you are going to be the only thing on this port that hears them fill." The provost's gold eyes were very steady. "The only question I am here to settle is whether you hear them for us, or whether you hear them from a cell." Wren looked at the provost for a while. "I'll hear them," she said. "Not for you, for the people on the pier, but I'll hear them." She took another bite of the gray loaf. "You don't get to put me in a chair and point me, though. I decide who I warn, that's the deal." "There is no deal," said Sale. There's the deal I just said, Wren said. Or there's a cell, in which case I'm not listening to anything, and the next coil that fills is the last thing 100 people on Pier 3 never hear coming. She chewed. Your choice. I've got good ears. I'm patient. Provost Sale's mantle went through a slow shift of color that the translator, again, could not render, and Vale, who had spent 30 years learning to read the small musics of alien bodies, thought that if he had to name it, he would have called it the color of an officer recalculating the price of everything. We will speak again, the provost said and left. That night, alone in the wrecked bay with the pier lights burning cold through the blown-out window, Dr. Vale sat among his rigs and listened to the station breathe, and understood that he had, 4 weeks ago, with a filed and licensed and entirely routine procedure, changed the arithmetic of the frontier. He had given a grade 16 human back her own ears. And the conquered, which had spent 80 years pretending Earth was a footnote, was about to learn what the surveyors had meant by clamor. He did not sleep, he kept listening, he heard nothing but the station. He envied her that, a little, the ability to hear the thing before it was there, and he feared it on her behalf, because he had lived long enough to know what powerful institutions did with a person who could see the future by a minute, and none of it was kind, and all of it began with the words for your own protection. The Ver came back 11 days later. They did not come with 2 coils. They came with 9. Wren felt the first of the 9, before the port's clocks had turned to the hour she would later mark as the start of it. She was on the observation gallery above Pier 2, where the authority had grudgingly let her sit because the gallery had a clean line of hearing out across the whole daylit apron, and because Provost Sale had decided, in the 11 days since the debrief, that an early warning array which chose its own posts was still an early warning array. Wren had taken the arrangement and given nothing back but her attention. She sat with her boots on the rail and a canteen of the port's flat mineral water beside her, and she listened to Halkut reach the way other people watched a fire. She heard the freighters first, always, the big chemical burners coasting in and out on their slow tempers. She heard the patrol boats holding their quarter charges, that low patient hum Sale's fleet kept ready so it could light fast. She heard the grav plating and the fuel sledges and the actuator song of 1,000 conquered machines, and under all of it, if she let her attention go loose, and why the way the doctor had taught her to let a repaired nerve rest, she heard the sky. And in the sky, 30 seconds before anything else in the Concord could have known it, 9 windings began to fill. She did not move fast. Moving fast was for people who had less time than they thought. Wren had 30 seconds and a good clock in her head, so she took the canteen, screwed the cap, and keyed the gallery comm to the provost's channel. 9 coils, she said, filling now. Wide arc from about relative north around to east. They're staggered, not all at once. Somebody out there is winding them in sequence so they light in a rolling wave instead of a single flash. A pause while she counted the rising tones, sorting them the way she had once sorted the individual creaks of a failing cargo coupling. First 3 are almost up. Call it 20 seconds to the first light. Provost Sale's voice came back without hesitation, and Wren gave her credit for that later. The provost did not waste even one of the 20 seconds asking, "Are you sure?" Sectors. North Pier's going to eat the first wave, then they'll roll it around to the freight cradles. They're not here for the medical spine this time, they're here for the tank farm. Wren stood, finally, unhurried. You've got maybe 40 seconds before the first 3 light and about 2 minutes before the whole arc's burning. If the tank farm goes up, this port goes with it. There was a silence on the channel that was not hesitation. It was the sound of an officer spending her 20 seconds well. Gunnery, Provost Sale said, on a different channel now, but she had not cut Wren out, and Wren understood that was deliberate, that the provost wanted the array to hear the effect of the array's own data. Traverse to relative north, elevation for orbital approach, do not wait for ignition contacts. Sable, feed me the sequence. Which lights first? And Ren's Sable, cargo hand, 20 years old, dirt under her nails and a smear of nothing on her jaw because she had learned to wipe the gel off before it dried, stood on a gallery over a frontier port and called 9 ignition points before they burned, one after another. In the rolling order she heard them fill. That one, left of it lower now, 2 together high, there's your 4th and 5th. The authority guns, for the first time in the recorded history of coil warfare, were already tracking the raiders when the raiders lit. 6 of the 9 died in the first 90 seconds, caught climbing out of their masking runs by guns that had no business being on target and were on target anyway. The 7th broke off. The 8th put a spread of ordnance into the North Pier before the authority walkers cut it apart, and the ordnance killed 9 dock workers who had not gotten to the shelters in time, and that was the cost. And Ren logged it in the flat place where she kept such things, and did not pretend it was a victory. The 9th coil did what the clever ones always did. It had wound slowest, held longest, and it lit last and low, screaming in under the gun elevation on a flat run at the tank farm. And for 2 seconds every projection on the port said the tank farm was gone and Halkut reach with it. Ren had already called it. 9th's going low and late for the tanks, she'd said, 20 seconds earlier before it lit, while it was still a rising note in the east. Your guns are elevated for the orbital approach. He knows that. He's coming in under them along the deck. You need something at deck level between him and the tanks right now, or you lose the port. And Provost Sale, who had spent her whole career learning that a coil could not be called before it burned, made the single largest bet of her life on the word of a 20-year-old human she had known for 11 days, and rolled 2 ground walkers out onto the apron at deck level with their guns depressed flat, aimed at a patch of empty sky, and waited. The 9th coil lit exactly where Ren said it would. The walkers were already firing. Afterward, when the apron was full of foam and wreckage, and the medics were working the North Pier, and the count of the dead was 9 and not 9,000, Provost Sale came up to the observation gallery, where Ren still sat with her boots on the rail and her canteen beside her, and she stood for a while without speaking, her mantle a slow, unreadable gray. You gave up the 7th, the provost said at last. It broke off and ran and you did not track it. You could have. I had you kill 6 and stop the 9th, or I had you scatter your guns chasing all 9 and lose the tanks, Ren said. You can't shoot everything. I told you the ones that mattered. The 7th didn't matter. It ran home to tell the clan what happened. She took a drink of the flat water, which it's doing right now. So you should probably think about that instead of the one that got away. Sale's gold eyes rested on her. You are describing the ver learning that Halkut Reach can hear them fill. I'm describing the ver learning there's one person on Halkut Reach who can hear them fill, Ren said, and deciding that person is the whole problem. She looked at the provost for the first time. They're not going to bring 9 next time, provost. They're going to bring 1. For me. That was the moment, Vale would say later, when the authority stopped seeing Ren's Sable as an asset and started seeing her as a liability, which on a frontier port were only ever a hair apart. An asset you protected, a liability you relocated. And the Conquered had a great and gentle machinery for relocating liabilities, all of it upholstered in the language of care. Adjudicator Osmi put it to Vale directly, in the wrecked bay, 3 days after the 9-coil raid, with the North Pier still under repair, and the port's flags at the height, the Saith flew them for their dead. The board has reached a determination, Osmi said. Miss Sable represents a sensory capability of conquered strategic significance and a personal security exposure of the First Order. Both conclusions point the same direction. She is to be transferred to the Corps, to the Institute at Vaunt Meridian, where her capability can be studied under controlled conditions, and her person can be protected from the reprisal she herself predicts. It is, Doctor, the safest outcome for everyone, including her. It's a cell with better lighting, Vale said. It is a laboratory with the finest acoustic instrumentation in the Concord, Osme corrected, without heat. She will be comfortable, she will be safe, and in time we may understand what she is well enough to grant it to others. Imagine, Doctor, a Concord that can hear the coil fill. Do you understand the number of lives that changes? She is one human. The capability is a civilization's worth of warning. You, of all beings, a physician who has spent his life restoring the sense of hearing, should grasp the arithmetic. And the terrible thing, Vale thought, was that he did grasp it. That was the trap of it. The arithmetic was real. A Concord that could hear the coil fill was a Concord in which the 9 dock workers on the North Pier did not die, in which 1,000 frontier ports slept easier, in which the oldest advantage of the raider, silence, simply ceased to exist. Osme was not lying about the arithmetic. She was only lying about the cost, and the cost was a girl in a laboratory being asked to listen on command for the rest of her life. Her own ears turned into Concord property, warning whoever the Concord decided was worth warning and no one else. You'll take her ears, Vale said, and call it studying them. We will keep her safe, said Osme, and call it what it is. The courier departs in 6 days. She will be aboard it. The scholar folded her 4 hands. I would ask you to help her understand that this is mercy. She trusts you. It will be easier for her from you. Vale did not answer. That evening he went to the gallery and told Wren everything Osme had said, all of it, the arithmetic included, because in 4 weeks of failing to prove her wrong, he had learned that the human did not thank you for softening things and did not forgive you for it either. She listened the way she listened to the sky, loose and wide and complete. 6 days, she said when he was done. 6 days. And you think the arithmetic's right? I think, Vale said carefully, that the arithmetic is real, and that a real arithmetic can still be an evil thing, and that I have spent 30 years giving people back their own hearing, and I did not do it so that a board could confiscate the best set of ears I ever restored. He was surprised by his own voice. Selene physicians did not climb, and he had climbed twice now on her account. I healed you, Wren. I did not manufacture a Concord asset. I healed a person. I will not help them pretend those are the same thing. Wren was quiet for a while. Out on the apron the repair crews worked under portable daylight rigs, and beyond them the real day was going gold toward the long frontier evening, and somewhere past the horizon of the port's curve a patrol boat held its quarter charge, humming low and patient, and she heard it, and she heard the grav plating, and she heard, Vale did not doubt, 100 things he would never hear in his life. They're going to move me in 6 days, she said, on a courier with a coil drive out a fixed departure lane. She said it slowly, the way she counted ignition points. And the Ver have a survivor who told them there's one person on this port who can hear them fill. And that person is about to be put on a slow ship down a lane anyone can predict. She turned her head, and there was nothing on her face that Vale could read as fear. The board's about to hand the clan the one thing they couldn't get on their own, a time and a place where I'm sitting still. Vale felt the cold of it go down through him. Then we tell the provost, he said. We tell Sale the courier is a trap. The provost knows, Wren said. The provost has known since Osme said the word courier. She's just not sure yet whether she'd rather lose me to the Ver or lose me to the Corps. She picked up her canteen. Which is the thing about the authority, Doctor. It's got no bad guys in it, just a lot of people doing arithmetic. And every one of the sums ends with me in a chair I didn't choose. Provost Sale did not sleep the way the land species slept, in a long, unbroken dark. She rested in the safe manner, in short submersions in the pressurized tank that occupied one wall of her office, surfacing every hour to check the board. On the 4th night before the courier she surfaced to find the human standing in her doorway, having walked past 2 guards who swore afterward they had not seen her, which was not true. They had seen her. They simply had not registered a small, unhurried person as a thing that required stopping. And that, Sale was learning, was the whole of the human's method. "You should not be able to be here," the provost said, drawing the water off her mantle. "Your guards are fine," Wren said. "I just walk like I belong. People fill in the rest." She came in and sat, uninvited, in the low chair across from the tank. "You've got a decision to make and you keep making it and unmaking it, and I can hear you doing it, so I figured we'd do it out loud." "You cannot hear a decision." "I can hear you not sleeping, surfacing every hour, actuators in your rig cycling because you keep standing up and sitting back down." Wren tipped her head. "You're not a bad officer, Provost. A bad officer would have shipped me already and slept fine. You're doing the sum where I go to the Corps and get studied and it saves 10,000 people someday. And then you're doing the other sum where I go to the Corps down a fixed lane and the VER take me off the courier and it saves nobody and costs your whole crew, and you can't make the two sums agree." She shrugged. "I've been doing the same two sums. I thought we could compare." Provost Sale regarded the human for a long moment, her gold eyes steady above the water line. "The board's arithmetic is not wrong," she said. "That is what makes it intolerable. A Concord that hears the coil fill is a Concord in which my dock workers do not burn. I have buried 9. I will bury more before I die. And you are telling me there might be a way that no officer ever again has to write the letter I wrote 3 days ago, 9 times. The provost's mantle rippled. "And the price of that is one human in a laboratory. I have paid worse prices for less. So have you, I think. So why does my body refuse to sleep on it?" "Because you know it doesn't work," Wren said. Sale went still. "They think they can take what I do and hand it out like a graft," Wren said. "Osme said it to the doctor. Imagine a Concord that can hear the coil fill. But it doesn't come out of me, Provost. It's not a chip they can copy. Dr. Vale didn't put anything in me. He fixed my ears, and my ears turned out to already do this, because I come from a world so loud that hearing the thing before it kills you is just how you get to grow up." She leaned forward. "You can study me in a lab for 50 years and you'll learn exactly one thing, that humans hear like this. And then you'll have to go to Earth. A whole planet of grade 16 Deathworlders who all, every one of them, hear the wire pull tight. That's the arithmetic Ozma's not saying out loud. Because the day the Concord admits it needs human ears is the day the Concord stops being the thing that grades Earth and starts being the thing that asks it for help." The tank's pumps cycled in the silence. "You are describing," Sale said slowly, "a shift in the order of the galaxy." "I'm describing why you can't sleep," Wren stood. "You don't want to be the officer who shipped the first free human ears to a lab so the board could spend 50 years failing to bottle them, when all along the answer was going to be Earth. You want to be the officer who figured out you could just ask." She went to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Provost, I don't want to be studied and I don't want to be shipped, but I'll tell you what I do want. I want to keep hearing them for the people on the pier. That's the only sum I've got that comes out clean. Everything else I've tried ends with me in a chair." She left. Sale did not stop her. The provost sank back into her tank and did not surface for 3 hours, and when she did, the courier was still scheduled, because a provost could not simply cancel a board order, but something in the arithmetic had shifted, and it had shifted because a human had walked past 2 guards to say the quiet part where an officer could hear it. On the 3rd day before the courier, a fuel hauler's coupling failed on Pier 1. It was not a raid. It was the ordinary violence of a working port, a cryo line that had been flagged for service and not serviced, a pressure spike, a valve that should have vented and instead began, slowly, to fail closed. The hauler crew did not know. The pier monitors did not know. The monitors watched for the signatures they were built to watch for, and a valve creeping toward rupture over 4 minutes was not a signature. It was a silence, and the port was very good at not hearing silences. Wren, 2 piers away on her gallery, heard it. She heard the note of the valve change as the seat deformed, a rising strain under the flat roar of the port that she would later describe to Vale as the same sound a coupling made in the last breath before it took most of her hearing, which was how she knew it, which was why her chest had gone cold before her mind had finished the thought. She keyed Pier 1 directly, not the Provost, not the Authority net, the Pier crew's own working channel. Fuel hauler on Cradle 4, your cryo valves failing closed and your lines going to spike, she said. You've got maybe 2 minutes before it lets go. Get your people back and vent it manually from the outboard station. Don't try the console. The console thinks everything's fine. There was the pause of a crew chief, hearing an unfamiliar voice tell him his own rig was about to kill him. Who is this? I'm the array, Wren said. You've heard about the array. This is the array telling you your valve's going. 90 seconds now. Move. They moved. Later the crew chief would say he moved because the voice was so flat that it frightened him more than an alarm. That alarms panicked, and this voice simply informed. And a voice that informed you of your death without panicking had to be certain. The line spiked at 88 seconds and vented through the outboard station into the daylight in a white plume 40 meters high, and no one died, and the port logged it as a near miss and a maintenance failure. And only the Pier 1 crew knew that a human 2 piers away had heard a valve deform under the roar of a working port and called it with a minute to spare. The crew chief came to the gallery that evening. He was a squat 4-armed hauler, greased to all 4 elbows, and he did not know what to say to her, so he set a sealed tin of something on the rail beside her canteen. A delicacy from his own world, she gathered, pungent and gray, and stood a moment. They're saying the board's taking you to the core, he said. That's the plan, Wren said. The hauler looked out at the port, at the 100 crews working the 100 cradles under the going gold light, at all the ordinary silences that could kill a working being, and that no monitor was built to hear. That's a bad plan, he said and left. Wren ate the gray delicacy. It was terrible. She ate all of it anyway, because a man had given it to her for hearing the thing that would have killed his crew, and there were worse reasons to eat a terrible thing. On the 4th day before the courier, the Ver sent a scout to look at her, and she looked back. It came in the way scouts came, disguised as ordinary traffic, a small independent hull filing a routine flight plan, a cargo run through the Halcut lanes, nothing on it that the traffic net would flag. It coasted through the port's outer approaches on chemical jets, cold-coiled, patient, and it did not attack anything, and it did not do anything a monitor could name, and it would have passed entirely unremarked except that Wren, on her gallery, heard it change. There's a hull on the outer ring pretending to be a freighter, she said, over the working channel mid-afternoon without moving. It's not a freighter. A freighter's crew moves like a crew loose, bored, wandering the hull doing freighter things. This one's crew is holding still and quiet in one compartment, and there's a coil aboard that's cold but sitting ready to fill, which no freighter ever does, and it's been holding a slow parallel course off the transit ring for 2 hours doing nothing but pointing its sensor mast at this gallery. She took a drink of water. It's a scout, Provost. Gesh sent it to see if the story's true, to see if there's really one set of ears on this port and where the ears sit, and whether the ears can be surprised. She almost smiled. It's listening to me, so I listen back. It heard nothing because I'm quiet. I heard everything because it isn't. Provost Sale's voice came back flat. Do you want it taken? No, let it go home. If you take it, Gesh learns her scout died at Halcut Reach and gets careful. Let it coast off thinking it saw a gallery with a girl on it and nothing else, and it'll go home and report a soft target sitting in the open, and Gesh will come exactly as arrogant as I need her to be. Wren's boots stayed on the rail. But mark it. That hull, that transponder. Because when she comes for real, that scout's going to be the one that leads her in, and I'd like to know its voice. The scout coasted off the outer ring an hour later and filed its false plan and burned for the deep frontier, and Wren tracked it the whole way out, the low, patient note of its cold coil never once filling. And when it was gone, she told the doctor she had its voice now, the way she had the skiff's slow pump, and that when the reaving came she would know which hull was Gesh's eyes. The gunnery officer of Platform 3 did not believe any of it. He was a young Saith named Asan, newly rotated to the Reach, and he had heard the stories about the array and decided, in the way of confident young officers, that the stories were the sort of thing frightened frontier ports told themselves. He said as much, not to Wren, but on the gunnery channel where he assumed she could not hear, and where she could hear perfectly well because she could hear the crew channels of half the port when she cared to and mostly chose not to. She cared to, that afternoon. She keyed Platform 3 directly. "Gunner Asan," she said, "you've got a coil holding a quarter charge 2 piers over from you, patrol boat, Cradle 6, and about 40 seconds ago its charge dropped to a fifth because your relief crew is late and the boat's captain is bleeding the coil down to save the winding. In about a minute, your relief's going to arrive and bring it back up to a quarter. You can't see any of that on your board because your board only shows you charged or not charged. But I can hear the winding sag when it bleeds and climb when it fills, and I just told you a thing about your own port you had no way to know, so the next time you want to decide out loud whether I'm real, check Cradle 6 first." A pause. "Charge is climbing back now. Your relief just got there. You're welcome." There was a silence on the gunnery channel. Then, some minutes later, a different, quieter voice from Platform 3, not on the crew channel but on the working channel, the one that reached her directly. "Array," Gunner Asan said. "Platform 3, checked Cradle 6. You were right about the bleed." A pause, the pause of a young officer reorganizing his model of the world. "I will not question it again." "Question it all you want," Wren said. "Just check Cradle 6 first." And she went back to her water and to the port and to the great living noise of it, and did not think about the young gunner again, because he was, now, one more person on the pier who would move when she told him to, and moving when she told them to was the only thing she had ever needed any of them to do. Dr. Vale spent the 5th and 4th and 3rd days before the courier doing the only thing a physician could do against a board determination, which was to build a record. He was methodical about it. He was Selene. Methodical was the shape of his grief. He pulled the pier logs from the day of the 2-coil raid and the day of the 9, and annotated them against the time-stamped channel traffic. Here, the evacuation called 61 seconds before ignition. Here, the gun traversed 40 seconds before the first light. Here, the deck-level walkers rolled out to a patch of empty sky 20 seconds before the 9th coil burned exactly where the human said it would. He built the record not because he believed the board would read it. The board had made its determination, and the board did not unmake determinations, but because he had learned, in a life of restoring senses to people the conquered had written off, that a record was a thing that outlived the officer who ignored it. Someday, he told himself, someone would read this and understand what had been standing on a gallery over Halkut Reach, and what the conquered had done with it. On the 3rd night, building the record, he found the thing that changed the shape of everything. He had requested the courier's flight plan, as her physician, on the pretext of certifying her fit to travel, a lie Osmi had permitted because it cost the board nothing. The plan came back routine. Departure in 3 days, a fixed lane out past the 3rd moon, a 9-day burn to a rendezvous with a core-bound liner. Vale read it the way he read everything, slowly, and then he read the vessel manifest, and then he sat very still. The courier's registered drive was a coil. Of course it was a coil. Every fast conquered hull ran a coil. That was the whole reason the coil mattered. But a courier carrying Wren's Sable down a fixed lane would spend 9 days as the one thing in the galaxy that could not sneak up on her and could very much be snuck up on, a coil-drive hull on a predictable line, deaf to everything, carrying the only being alive who was not. And Vale, who did not think like a raider, made himself think like one for the length of a held breath, and understood exactly what the Ver survivor had carried home to the clan, and exactly what the clan would do with it. They would not attack the port again. The port had ears now. They would wait for the port to put its ears on a slow ship down a fixed lane, and they would take her off it in the dark between the moons where no gallery could hear them fill, and the conquered would have handed them, in the name of mercy and strategic study, the one prize 11 days of raiding could not buy. Vale took the record, and the flight plan to Provost Sale at once. He found her already looking at it. "You see it too," he said. "I saw it the hour Osmi said courier," Sale said. Her mantle was the flat gray he had learned meant she had stopped pretending. "I have spent 3 days trying to find the arithmetic in which I am wrong. There is none. The board is going to ship the only asset that has ever hurt the Ver down the single lane the Ver can predict, and it is going to do it believing it is protecting her, and I cannot countermand a board determination without cause the board will accept, and by the time I manufacture such cause the courier will have departed." "Then don't countermand it," said a voice from the doorway. Ren had walked past the guards again. "Don't countermand it," Ren said again, coming in. "Let the courier go. Let the board have its departure. Let the Ver have their fixed lane and their slow ship and their prize sitting still in the dark between the moons." She stopped in front of the tank, small and unhurried, and Vale watched the provost's mantle shift as the human said the thing neither of them had let themselves say. "You've both been trying to solve the problem where I'm the bait. Stop. I'm not the bait. I'm the hunter. They just don't know it yet because everybody in this galaxy looks at me and sees a thing that gets hunted." "Explain," said Provost Sale, in the voice she used when she had stopped being an obstacle and started being a weapon. "The whole reason the coil works is that nobody hears it fill," Ren said. "The whole reason the Ver are dangerous is that their ships are silent until they burn. Take that away and they're just slow, ugly hulls full of raiders who committed to a plan. And out there in the dark between the moons with no port roar to hide in with everything quiet," she spread her hands, "I hear better in the quiet, Provost. Way better. The port's loud. It's why I only get you 30 seconds here. Out there I'd hear a coil start to fill from further off than you'd believe, and there'd be nothing else to listen past. You want to fight the Ver somewhere they can't be silent and I can't be deafened. Put me on a quiet ship in the dark and wait for them to come to me." Vale understood then the shape of it, and it turned his stomach and lifted his hearts in the same instant. "You want to be on the courier," he said. "I want to be on a courier," Ren said. "Not the board's. The board's courier is exactly what it looks like, a slow deaf ship full of nobody who can fight, crewed to look like a soft target because it is one. If the Ver take that one, everybody on it dies for nothing." She turned to Sale. "But if the board's courier goes out empty, crewed by your people, dark, playing soft, and I go out somewhere else, close, quiet, in something small that the Ver aren't looking at because they're all looking at the courier, then I hear them commit to the soft ship, and I tell your guns exactly where 9 hulls are going to light before they light, out in the open dark where there's no tank farm to hide behind and no port to hit, and nothing between your guns and them but vacuum." She let it sit. "You don't defend the port from the raid. You pick the raid. You choose the ground. You make them come to the one place in the whole frontier where the silence works for me instead of against me, and then you end it." The provost's office was very quiet. The tank's pump cycled. "The board will never authorize it," Sale said at last, and it was not a refusal Vale heard. It was an officer stepping through the problem. "The board would never risk the asset in a live engagement. The board's entire determination is that you are too valuable to endanger." "So don't tell the board," Ren said. "Tell the board its courier's leaving on schedule with its asset aboard, safe as a vault. Then leave it on schedule, with your people. And I'll be somewhere the board never has to know about until it's over, at which point the board can write me up for whatever it likes, because the alternative it was offering me was a laboratory, and I'll take a court over a cage." "You are asking me," Provost Sale said slowly, "to disobey a board determination, decoy a conquered vessel, and stake my crew and my port on the ears of one human in the dark, against a full raider clan that outnumbers my ready guns. Yeah, Ren said, I am. And if you are wrong, if you do not hear them in time, out there in your quiet, with nothing between us and 9 coils but your word. Ren looked at the provost for a long moment, and Vale saw her do the thing she did, the arithmetic behind the flat eyes, the sum run clean. Then you'll have found out the same thing you'd find out if you shipped me to the core and the Ver took me off the courier anyway, she said. That the Concord's out of time on this. That silence stopped being safe the day the doctor fixed my ears. The only difference is which one of us gets to choose the ground. She tipped her head. I'm choosing it, out there. In the quiet. That's the deal, Provost. Same as the last one. I decide who I warn and where I stand when I do it. You've just never had an asset who came with terms before. Provost's sail rose out of the tank to her full column of height, water sheeting off the mottled gray of her mantle, and her gold eyes were the flat gold of a deep-water predator that had, at last, found something it recognized. No, the provost said. I never have. They had 3 days. Vale would remember them afterward as the strangest 3 days of his long career, because they were spent, in secret, on the wrong side of a board determination, and because the human at the center of them ran them like a cargo manifest. No drama, no speeches, just a list of things that had to be true by departure and the steady checking of them off. The board's courier had to go out looking exactly as planned, a slow deaf hull down the fixed lane, crude thin, its transponder singing the routine song of a ship carrying a protected passenger. Sale assigned it a volunteer skeleton crew of her own people, hard veterans who understood they were the visible half of a trap and who, to Vale's quiet astonishment, competed for the berths. The Saith did not have a word that translated cleanly as bait. The nearest was a word that meant the diver who goes down first, and it was an honor, and Vale did not understand it and did not need to. Ren's ship was the harder thing. It had to be small, small enough to be ignored, small enough to run dark, small enough that 9 hulls fixed on a fat courier would not spare it a second scan. It had to be quiet, which on Ren's terms meant more than silent running. It meant a hull with a drive she could hear past, a crew that understood that noise was death, an interior stripped of every actuator and pump and cycling system that would sit between her ears and the dark. Sale found her a survey skiff, an old thing decommissioned, with a chemical drive instead of a coil, slow, short-legged, but silent in the register that mattered, a ship that made the honest dumb sounds of burning fuel and nothing else. Ren spent a full day aboard it before departure, sitting in its dark, learning its every note, so that on the night it mattered she would know instantly which sounds were her own ship and which were the thing coming to kill her. You are memorizing the skiff, Vale observed on that day, having come aboard with the pretext of certifying her fit and the truth of not wanting her to sit in the dark alone. I'm learning what to ignore, Ren said. She was sitting in the pilot's cradle with her eyes closed. Half of hearing is knowing what not to listen to. On the port there's so much I have to throw away that I only get you 30 seconds. Out here, she tipped her head at the hull around them, there's almost nothing to throw away, just the skiff. So I learn the skiff cold, every valve and every pump, and then anything that isn't the skiff I hear the instant it starts. She opened her eyes. You want to know the truth, Doctor. On Earth this isn't a gift. On Earth everybody does this. You learn your house, your street, the ordinary noise of your own life, and then the one wrong sound in it stands out like a fire. That's not a superpower. That's just growing up somewhere that kills you if you don't. Vale sat down in the co-pilot's cradle, his 4 hands folded, and asked the thing he had wanted to ask for 4 weeks. Do you regret it, that I healed you past baseline, that I woke this? Ren was quiet for a while. In the stripped dark of the skiff, Vale could hear his own hearts and the tick of the hull cooling and nothing else, and he understood, dimly, a fraction of what she lived inside. My whole life I heard too much, she said at last. On Earth it's normal, everybody's loud, everybody's ears are like this, you fit. Then I went out to the frontier for the work and it was quiet, and I could hear things nobody else could, and it made me strange. The coupling that took my hearing, she touched the faint scratch on her cheek, an old habit, for about a week after before you started fixing it I was deaf, really deaf for the first time in my life. And it was awful, and it was also the quietest I'd ever been. I thought maybe I'd just stay a little broken, be normal quiet like everybody out here, she shrugged. Then you gave it back, all of it, more than I started with. And for about a day I was angry at you because you'd made me strange again in a place where strange gets you shipped to a lab. She looked at him. But then the coil filled on Cradle 9, and 12 people who'd have burned walked down a stair instead, and I stopped being angry. So no, I don't regret it. I just wish it didn't cost so much to be the one who hears. Vale did not have an answer worthy of that, so he gave her the only true thing he had. I have restored hearing to 411 beings, he said. I have made every one of them more like their own kind. You are the only patient I ever made stranger, and it was an accident, and it is the finest thing these hands have done. He rose. Whatever the board writes about me, I will keep that. Ren almost smiled. It was not much. It was the first he had seen. Get off my quiet ship, Doctor, she said, not unkindly. I've got a hull to learn. Adjudicator Osmi very nearly unmade the whole of it on the second day before departure, and she did it the way scholars did damage, by being careful. She came to certify the transfer arrangements herself, 4 hands folded into her gray robes, and she walked the courier from bow to stern with a tech and a manifest, and she noted in her dry and thorough way that the passenger cabin had been fitted for a Saith and not a human. The acceleration cradle sized wrong, the atmosphere mix keyed to the crew's standard, and not to the lighter human blend that Vale had filed in her medical record. Small things, true things. The things a decoy hull crewed by Saith veterans would get wrong, and a hull actually carrying Ren's Sable would get right. Vale was there, because he had made himself part of the furniture of the transfer, and he watched the scholar's careful mind begin to assemble the discrepancy, and he did the only thing he could think of, which was to be a physician about it. The cradle is wrong because I ordered it changed, he said, before Osmi could finish the thought aloud. She cannot travel 9 days in a standard cradle. Her spine is not built for the sustained load a Saith tolerates. I have requisitioned a human-rated cradle from station stores. It will be fitted before departure. The atmosphere mix will be corrected on the same order. If the board would prefer I not certify her fit, I will note my objection, and you may travel her in a cradle that will injure her, and explain the injury to the Institute when she arrives. He let the dry Selene disapproval sit in his voice. I assumed the board's interest in her condition extended to her arriving in it. It was exactly the right register. The aggrieved specialist, defending his patient against the crude logistics of the authority. And Osmi, who respected competence above all things, inclined her head and made a note and did not pursue the discrepancy any further, because the physician's explanation accounted for it, and a scholar who has an explanation stops looking. That was the lesson Vale took from the closest moment, that even the most careful mind in the Concord stopped looking the instant it had a sum that closed, and that the whole of Ren Sable's method, walking past guards, being ignored, being underestimated, was simply the exploitation of a galaxy full of minds that stopped looking too soon. She is important to you, Osmi observed at the hatch, not accusing, merely noting. She is my patient, Vale said. She is the Concord's asset, Osmi corrected gently, and you would do well, Doctor, to complete the separation between those two facts before the courier departs. It will be easier for you. She paused. It is always easier in the end to have let the institution carry the weight. I have watched a great many idealists learn that. I would spare you the lesson if I could. I am sure you would, Vale said in thought. You have no idea what departs on that courier, or what does not, and I am going to spend the rest of my life grateful that your careful mind stopped looking one question short. The intelligence on the clan came in the night before departure, and it was worse than the plan had assumed. Sale laid it out in her office, for the three of them, in the low light she used when the water was drawn off her tank. The Ver survivor of the 9-coil raid had reached the clan, as Wren predicted, and the clan had responded, as Wren predicted, but the shape of the response was larger than a single hull come for a single girl. The clan mother of the Ver Reavers, a matriarch the frontier logs named only Gesh, a name that meant, in the raider's own tongue, something close to the tide that does not turn, had put a bounty and a grievance together. 9 of her hulls had burned at Halkut Reach. That was a wound the clan could not carry without answer. And the survivor had brought home not just the location of the human ears, but the reason they mattered. That the port could now hear the coil fill, that the oldest weapon of the Ver had been made useless by a single grade 16 native. She is not coming for a bounty, Sale said. She is coming to prove that the coil still works. If the human is on that courier and the clan takes her off it in silence in the dark before she can call a single ignition, then the coil is not broken, then Halkut Reach was a fluke, then the Ver are still the thing that cannot be heard. Gesh is not hunting a girl. She is hunting the idea that a human undid her. The provost's mantle was very still. She is bringing the whole reaving. My people count between 14 and 20 hulls, against my 6 ready guns and 1 skiff. The number sat in the room. That's better, Wren said. Vale turned to stare at her. Even Sale's gold eyes came around. 9 hulls spread wide around a port, hiding in the roar. That's the hard problem, Wren said, unbothered. 20 hulls, all committed to 1 kill, all converging on 1 slow courier out in the quiet dark where there's nothing to hide behind. That's 20 rising tones in a room with no other noise. She's not spreading them to raid. She's massing them to make a point. And a mass of coils all filling to converge on 1 target is the single loudest thing I will ever have heard in my life. She almost smiled again, that small grim flex. She's bringing me a choir, Provost, and she thinks it's an ambush. You cannot call 20 ignition points fast enough for 6 guns to matter, Sale said, but it was the voice of an officer testing a plan, not rejecting it. I don't have to call all 20. I have to call the order they light and the ones that matter, same as before. 6 guns, 20 hulls, you can't kill them all, but you don't need to. Gesh needs every one of those hulls to reach the courier silent and unseen. That's her whole proof. The second your guns are on target before they light, the second the first hull burns and dies with your round already in it, the proof's dead. The coil's broken. And a clan mother who came to prove the coil still works, watching her hulls light into fire that's already waiting for them. Wren shrugged. She turns. She has to. She came to win an argument, not a war, and I'll have won the argument in the first 30 seconds. The tide that doesn't turn is going to turn, because the alternative is feeding her whole, reaving into guns that hear her coming. Provost Sale was silent for a long moment. You are proposing, she said, to break a raider clan not by destroying it but by proving in front of its matriarch that its central weapon no longer functions. I'm proposing to make her watch, Wren said. That's the whole thing, Provost. Everybody out here runs on the coil being silent. The Ver, your actuary tables, the price of a berth, all of it. I'm not going to kill 20 hulls. I'm going to make 1 clan mother watch her ships light into waiting guns until she understands the silence is over, and then let her run home and tell everyone. You don't win this by sinking her fleet. You win it by ending the thing she believes. She stood. Now. Departure's in 11 hours. I need to sleep in the skiff 1 more time. It's got a pump that cycles a half-beat slow, and I want it in my bones before the dark, so I never once mistake it for a coil. She left them there, the provost and the doctor, in the low light with the number 20 sitting in the room, and Vale thought that in 30 years he had met generals and adjudicators and fleet officers who commanded more, and not one of them had ever frightened him the way this small, calm human frightened him, walking off to memorize a slow pump so that she would not, in the dark, mistake her own heartbeat for her death. The night before departure, Wren went to meet the 6 who would fly the decoy. Vale went with her because he had appointed himself, somewhere in the last weeks, the keeper of the things she did not think to do for herself, and because he suspected she would not have gone at all if left to her own arithmetic. Not from cowardice, she had none, but because she did not yet fully understand that the beings she sent out as bait were beings, and not variables. That was the one place her clarity failed her. She could hear a valve fail across a working port and count 19 coils in the dark, and she could not always hear, until it was in front of her, that the price she was spending was paid in people. The 6 were in a ready room off the courier's berth, in the pale blue of the Meridian Concord, checking their rigs with the unhurried competence of veterans. Their commander was a Saith named Ruth, old for the service, her mantle gone the pale gray of age, and she looked up when the human came in and regarded her with the flat gold eyes of someone who had already made her peace with the geometry. "The array," Ruth said, "the one whose ears we are dying for." "You're not dying for my ears," Wren said. "You're flying a decoy so my ears can pick the ground. That's different. And if the plan works, you don't die at all, you fly out dark, you hold, and by the time the Ver work out the courier's empty, the guns have already killed half of them off your position and the rest are running." She stood in the doorway, small and dun and dirt-flecked among the tall blue veterans, and she did the thing Vale had never once seen her do, which was to look uncertain. "That's the plan. I need you to know it's a real plan, not a story I'm telling to feel better about using you. If I could crew it with Sims, I would. I can't. The Ver have to see a live crew moving on that hull or they won't commit. It has to be real people. It's the one part of this I hate." Ruth considered the human for a long moment. "You came to tell us the plan is real," the old Saith said. "You did not come to tell us it is safe." "It's not safe," Wren said. "Coils are coming. Some of you might not fly home. I won't stand here and tell you a number I can't promise. All I can tell you is that every hull that comes for you, I'll hear it fill before it lights, and I'll put your guns on it, and I will spend the whole engagement doing nothing but trying to keep you alive while your hull does the one thing only a live crew can do. That's the deal I've got. It's the same deal I give everybody. I decide who I warn, and out there the whole time, I'll be warning you." Ruth was quiet. Then she made a sound, low, a pressure hiss that Vale had learned was the Saith equivalent of grim assent, and the 5 others made it after her, and it filled the ready room like water filling a low place. "We volunteered for this array," Ruth said. "Do you know why? Not for your ears. For the 9 we buried off the North Pier who died because no one heard the coils fill in a Concord that had decided the coil could not be heard. You are the reason that will never be true again. We go down first so that you can go on hearing. It is," she paused, choosing the word, "it is a good exchange. My people have a name for the diver who goes down first into water no one has sounded. It is an honor. Do not spend the night grieving us. Spend it learning your pump. That is the useful thing." Her gold eyes did not waver. "And when it is done, if I do not fly home, hear the next one for someone. That is all any diver asks, that the sounding was not wasted." Wren looked at the old Saith for a while. "I'll hear the next one," she said. "I'll hear all of them. That's the one thing I can promise and mean it." They flew out the next morning, the 6 of them, and Vale would remember, when 4 of them came home and 2 did not, that the human had not grieved them the night before, exactly as Ruth had asked, but had gone back to the skiff and sat in its dark and learned its slow pump until she knew it in her bones, and that this, from Wren's sable, was the truest grief she had, the promise to hear the next one made good in advance, in the only language she trusted, which was preparation. The board's courier departed Halkut Reach on schedule, into a bright frontier morning, its coil lighting clean and blue off Cradle 2, its transponder singing the routine song of a protected transfer, and every instrument in the Concord that watched it depart reported an asset safely in transit to the core. The passenger cradle was empty. In it rode a mass simulator and a med monitor rigged to report a human's vitals, Vale's last quiet contribution, A lie told in the language of pulse and respiration that would satisfy any remote check the board cared to run. The courier's skeleton crew were 6 safe veterans who had volunteered to be the diver who goes down first, and they flew their decoy out the fixed lane past the third moon, with the calm competence of people who knew exactly what they were and had decided it was worth it. 2 hours earlier and 40 degrees off the lane, in the dark of the port's own shadow, the survey skiff had slipped its moorings on cold chemical jets and gone silent into the space between the moons, running dark, running quiet, carrying one human, one Selene physician who had refused with total finality to be left behind, and nothing else that hummed or cycled or sang that its passenger had not already learned by heart. And 100,000 kilometers out in the deeper dark, the tide that did not turn was gathering its hulls to converge on a slow, bright ship, certain, as its kind had always been certain, that it came in silence. The skiff hung dead in the dark, and Dr. Vale learned what quiet was. He had thought he understood it. He was Selene. His people prized silence, built their surgeries in acoustic isolation, spoke of the pure register the way other species spoke of clean water. He had been wrong. What he had called silence all his life was a room with the loud things turned off. This was different. Out here past the third moon, in a hull running cold with every pump and panel stilled to the minimum that kept them breathing, there was so little sound that he could hear the fluid move in his own 4 ears, could hear his hearts argue with each other, could hear, he was sure of it, though he could not have proved it, the tick of his own thoughts. It was unbearable. He understood in the first hour of it why the frontier had graded Wren's world unfit for contact. A species that grew up hearing this much and did not go mad was not a species you wanted to meet in the dark. Wren sat in the pilot's cradle with her eyes closed and her hands loose and did not seem to find it unbearable at all. She found it, Vale understood, like home. "Anything?" he asked once in a whisper, and she opened one eye. "A freighter way out, chemical, no threat. The courier ahead of us 40 degrees over, running its coil clean." She closed the eye. "And the dark. Don't whisper, doctor. Talk normal or don't talk. Whispers have a hiss in them. I have to throw the hiss away, and I'd rather not have to." He did not talk. He sat in the co-pilot's cradle and he watched her listen, and on a slim relay screen he watched the tactical plot that Sale fed them from the port 6-gun platforms, positioned in the last 3 days under cover of routine maintenance, spread in a loose net along the approaches to the fixed lane, dark and cold and waiting, their crews as silent as the skiff. The provost had staked everything on a plan whose entire sensor suite was one human's ears, and she had positioned her guns not where her instruments told her the threat would come, but where Wren, studying the geometry of the lane and the moons and the dark, had told her a clan mother who wanted a silent kill would bring her hulls. They waited 4 hours. Then Wren said in her flat manifest voice, "Here they come," and Vale's heart seized because the tactical plot in front of him was completely empty. "Plot's clear," he said. "Plot's going to be clear for about 3 more minutes," Wren said. "They're at the edge of my range, filling, not close yet. Let me count them before I call it." Her head tipped, that half-degree, the listening animal tilt he had first seen in his own medical bay a lifetime ago. "There's a lot of them, doctor." She counted for 2 minutes in total silence, and Vale did not breathe well, and then she keyed the relay to Sale on the tightest, lowest transmission the skiff could make. "Provost, Sable, count is 19 hulls filling now, in a wide crescent coming down the lane toward the courier from relative north through east." A pause. "They're staggered again, but smarter this time. She's winding them in a rolling sequence time so they all reach full charge within a few seconds of each other, so when they light it looks like one wall of fire arriving at once." She learned from the port. "She's not lighting them in a line I can read one at a time. She's trying to make them a chord instead of a scale." Wren's jaw shifted. "It won't work. A chord's still made of notes. Stand by for the order. I'll feed you the ones your guns can reach before they burn." Vale watched the plot. It was still empty. 19 hulls filling in the dark, and every instrument the Conquered owned said the space around them was clean. And one human with her eyes closed was reading a Raider matriarch's battle plan off the rising song of her superconductors like a score laid open on a stand. First platform, Wren said. The 2 nearest hulls are in your arc, northmost pair. They'll light in about 20 seconds low and together. Traverse now, elevation flat, and fire the instant I say light, not before, or you'll waste it on where they were, not where they are. A beat. Set. On the plot, gun platform 1 came alive, traversing to a patch of empty dark. Second platform, you've got 3 coming through your arc behind the first pair. They'll light 6 seconds later. Traverse east, hold. Wren's voice never rose, never hurried. A woman reading cradle numbers off a manifest. Everybody else hold cold. Don't light your platforms till your targets are about to burn, or they'll see your traverse and shift. Let them commit. 19 hulls, 6 guns, 1 voice in the dark. Platform 1, Wren said, light. The 2 northmost hulls lit into fire that was already waiting for them. Provost Sale watched it from the command platform, and she had fought raiders for 30 years, and she had never once seen it happen in this order. Always, the coil lit first and the guns chased it, a half-second and a lifetime behind. Now her platform's rounds were already in the dark where the drive flare bloomed, converging on a point of empty space that became, in the same instant, 2 Ver hulls lighting their coils, and the rounds and the fire arrived together, and the 2 hulls came apart before they had finished the burn that was supposed to be the first anyone knew of them. 2 hulls, 19 down to 17, in the first 4 seconds, and not one of Sale's crews had seen a target until the human named it. Second platform, came Wren's voice flat, unhurried over the tight relay. Your 3 are lighting now. Light. Platform 2 fired into the dark, and 3 more Ver hulls burned into rounds already placed to meet them. And Sale heard, over the crew channel, the sound her veterans made, not a cheer. The Saith did not cheer, but a low-pressure hiss that was the nearest her people came to awe. They were killing an enemy they could not see, on the word of a passenger they could not hear, and every round was landing. And the thing that had made the Ver the terror of the frontier for a generation was, in front of the provost's flat gold eyes, simply ceasing to be true. 17 hulls, then 14, then 11. And then the tide that did not turn began, for the first time in the memory of the frontier, to adapt in real time, because Gesh was not a fool, and a clan mother did not become the tide by dying stupidly. She's stopping the sequence, Wren said, and for the first time there was something under the flatness, not fear, but the sharp focus of a problem changing shape. The rest of them just stopped filling. 9 hulls holding cold, not charging. She figured out I can only call them when they wind up. So now she's going to close the distance dark on cold jets, no coil, silent even to me, and light them all at once at knife range, where 30 seconds of warning isn't enough for your guns to matter. A pause. She's not proving the coil works anymore. She just watched 5 hulls die proving it doesn't. Now she's just trying to kill us before I can call it. How long, Sale said, until they are in knife range? On cold jets, 6-7 minutes. And I won't hear the jets till they're close. Chemical jets are quiet and there's 9 of them drifting, and the courier's coil is bright in my ears and washing them out. Wren's voice was moving fast now, the manifest read at speed. Provost, listen. She's committed 9 hulls to a silent drift onto the courier and this skiff. Your guns can't target a cold drifting hull. You're as blind as everybody else once the coils go quiet. So here's what we do. The courier's coil is the loudest thing out here, and it's washing out my hearing of the drift. Have the courier cut its drive. Go dark. Total silence. The second that coil dies, I lose the one thing that's deafening me. And 9 cold hulls drifting through vacuum on chemical jets become the only sound in the dark, and I will hear every one of them. If the courier goes dark, Sale said, it is a dead hull adrift. If the drift is a feint and Gesh lights her coils and runs, the courier cannot maneuver. The courier's the bait, Provost. It was always the bait. Tell your divers to go dark and hold and trust the ears you staked all this on. A beat. You've killed 5 hulls tonight that no instrument in the Concord could see. Do you believe me yet or don't you? Provost Sale looked at the empty tactical plot, at the 5 dead hulls that had been 5 confident points of certainty until a human named them, and she made the second largest bet of her life. Courier, she said, cut your drive, go dark and hold. Authority guns, cold and silent, weapons free on the arrays, call only. Her mantle was the flat committed gray. Miss Sable, the dark is yours, find them. 40 degrees over and 100,000 kilometers out, the board's courier shut down its coil, and the brightest sound in Ren Sable's sky went out like a snuffed flame. In the skiff, Dr. Vale watched the human go somewhere he could not follow. When the courier's coil died, Ren's face changed, not dramatically. Nothing about her was ever dramatic, but the last tension of throwing away went out of it, and she settled into the cradle the way water settles into a still basin, and Vale understood that for the first time since he had known her, there was nothing she had to ignore. No port roar, no coil glare. Just the dark and the skiff's slow half-beat pump, and 9 hulls somewhere in it, drifting cold on chemical jets toward the place where she sat. There she breathed and did not key the relay yet because she was still counting. 1, 2, 2 together, close, 4. There's 4 in the near group and they're the ones coming for us, not the courier. She split them. She sent 5 for the bait and 4 for the skiff, because somewhere in the last 10 minutes she worked out that the courier's empty and the ears are somewhere else, and this little cold ship that's been sitting off the lane doing nothing is the only thing that makes sense. Ren's eyes moved behind their lids. She's smart, Doctor. She's really smart. She's coming for me directly and she's coming quiet. Then we run, Vale said, and hated the fear in his own voice. We can't outrun a coil on chemical jets. The second I light our drive to run, I'm the loudest thing out here and I go deaf and they light and it's over. Ren's hands were very still on the dead controls. No, we hold. We stay the quiet thing and I hunt them back. She keyed the relay low. Provost, 9 hulls drifting cold, 5 converging on the courier, 4 converging on the skiff. Here's the courier's 5. She read them off, a string of vectors and ranges, drift cones in the empty dark, each one a cold hull that no instrument could see and one human could hear moving through vacuum by the whisper of its steering jets. Your guns can't hit a cold hull. But a cold hull has to light its coil to make its attack run, and when it lights, it's committed and it's close and it's exactly where I say it is. So you wait. You let the 5 come in on the dark courier thinking it's blind, and the instant any of them lights to make its run, I call it and you kill it before the burn finishes. Same as before. You just have to hold your nerve, while 5 silent hulls close on a ship that can't see them. There was a silence on the relay. And the 4 coming for you? Sale asked. Those are mine, Ren said. Your guns can't reach this far off the lane in time and you'll need every round for the courier's 5. The 4 coming for the skiff, I handle from here. Vale turned to her. We have no weapons. This is a survey skiff. It has a chemical drive and a hull and nothing else. How do you propose to handle 4 Raider hulls? Ren opened her eyes and looked at him, and there was something in her face he had not seen before and would spend a long time trying to name. Not cruelty. Nothing so warm as cruelty. Just the flat certainty of a being from a world that killed you if you did not do the arithmetic. The same way anything from a loud world handles 4 hunters in the dark, she said. I don't fight all 4, I make them fight each other. She looked back into the dark. 4 hulls, drifting cold, running silent, no coil, no active sensors because active sensors would light them up for your guns. They're blind, Doctor. They're doing exactly what I'm doing, creeping through the dark by feel, terrified to make a sound, each one trusting the others to hold formation. They can't see each other any better than they can see us. The only thing keeping four blind hulls from colliding in the dark is the formation Gesh gave them and their discipline holding it. She reached, at last, for the skiff's controls, not the drive, but the cold steering jets, the small quiet chemical puffs that even her ears could barely hear. So I break the formation. I put this skiff right into the middle of them, quiet as they are, and I move just enough to make one of them flinch. One panicked steering burn, one hull breaking its cone because it thinks the thing next to it is us, and blind hunters in the dark who lose their discipline do the rest themselves. What followed, Vale could never afterward describe to anyone who had not been in the skiff because there was nothing to see. The tactical plot stayed empty. The hull stayed dark. There was only the human in the cradle, her hands feathering the cold jets in small, precise breaths of gas, moving the skiff through a dark full of hunters by an internal map made entirely of sound. And her voice, low, narrating the arithmetic of it not for him but for herself, the way a surgeon talks through a procedure to keep the hands honest. Nearest one's off our port drifting, holding its cone. Second one's behind it tighter. I'm going to slide between them, quiet, and put us close enough to the second one that when I give the first one a reason to flinch, it flinches toward the second one. A breath of gas. The skiff moved a meter. Third and fourth are wider, trailing. They're the disciplined ones. They'll hold longest. Doesn't matter. I only need the first flinch. Vale sat rigid in the co-pilot's cradle and did not make a sound, because a whisper had a hiss in it, and the hiss might be the thing that killed them. And he understood now, fully in his body, what it was to be from a loud world, to know that the difference between living and dying was whether you could stay quiet enough, long enough, in a dark full of things that hunted by sound. His whole civilized life he had thought of hearing as a sense. In the skiff he learned it was a war. Now, Wren whispered, and put a hard puff of gas out the skiff's port jets, the loudest thing she had made all night, a sharp chemical bark in the silence, and then killed it and went dead still. For 1 second, nothing. Then, off the port side, a hull that had spent 20 terrified minutes creeping blind through the dark heard something bark right beside it, in a place its formation said was empty, and did the thing that blind, frightened hunters do. It flinched. It lit its steering jets in a panicked burn to break away from the sound, and the second hull, tighter behind it, blind, heard the first one's jets suddenly fire where no jets should be, decided the shape lunging at it in the dark was the human skiff making its run, and lit its coil. There, Wren breathed. First flinch. The second hull's coil flared in the dark, bright and sudden, and in its light, for the first time all night, actual light, a drive flare blooming in the black, the first hull saw, 100 meters off its bow, not the skiff, but another hull, coil flaring, bearing down. And the first hull, already panicking, already committed to its break, did what its every instinct screamed and lit its own coil to run. And the two hulls that Gesh had sent to kill the skiff burned their drives into the dark at knife range from each other, each one certain the other was the enemy. And Vale did not see what happened next because Wren had already turned the skiff away, cold, silent. A small dead thing sliding off into the dark, while behind them 2 raider hulls resolved a collision geometry that blind panic had made unsurvivable. 2, Wren said quietly. The other 2 are breaking off. They saw the flares, they don't know what happened. They just know 2 of their own lit up and died in a place that was supposed to be empty, and they want no part of it. She let out a long breath. That's the 4 handled. Vale realized he had not breathed in some time. He breathed. You did not fire a shot, he said. I don't have a shot to fire, Wren said. I have ears and a cold ship and 4 blind hunters too disciplined to make a sound and too frightened to trust it. On Earth that's a Tuesday. She keyed the relay. Provost, the skiff's 4 are down to 2 and the 2 are running. How's your courier's 5? Provost Sale's courier died well. The 5 cold hulls closed on the dark decoy over 11 minutes, and Sale's 6 veterans held their nerve in a ship that could not see the things converging on it, because their provost had told them to trust the array, and because the array had already killed 7 hulls they never saw. When the first of the 5 lit its coil to make its attack run, bright and sudden, and exactly where Wren's voice named it a half-second before the burn, 3 of Sail's platforms fired as one, and the hull died in the middle of its run. The second lit and died the same way. The third. But the 4th and 5th had learned, in the 11 minutes, the same lesson Gesh had learned, and they did not light their coils. They came in on cold jets to point-blank range of the dark courier and opened fire with hull guns, and the courier, blind and unpowered and playing dead to the last, took the fire it had been built to take. Sail's platforms killed the 4th hull as it fired, its muzzle flare giving it away at last. The 5th put a full spread into the courier's midships before the guns found it, and the courier, 6 volunteers, the divers who go down first, broke open to the dark and did not answer the provost's hail again. Sail logged it, she would carry it. But she had traded a decoy and 6 who chose it for 11 raider hulls and the thing that mattered more than any hull, and she knew the trade, and she flew the flag for them later at the height her people flew it, and she did not pretend it was clean. 11 hulls dead, 2 running, and somewhere in the dark, the 12th through 19th Gesh's own corps, the hulls the clan mother had held back to watch her point be proven, sat cold and silent and did not commit, because their matriarch had just watched 11 of her ships die to an enemy that saw them before they burned, and the tide that did not turn was doing arithmetic of her own. "Provost," Wren said over the relay, and her voice had changed again, gone quiet and certain in a new way. "Gesh's flagship. It's the big one holding back relative north and high cold. She's got 6 hulls with her, all cold, all holding. She's watching. She hasn't run and she hasn't committed. She's trying to understand what just happened to her because everything she believed about the dark is broken and she's a clan mother. She can't just believe it. She has to know." Wren was silent a moment. "I'm going to talk to her." "You are going to what?" said Sail and Vale almost together. "She came out here to prove the coil still works, to prove a human didn't undo her. She just watched a human undo her 11 times in the dark she owns." Wren keyed the skiff's comm to the open raider band, the one the Ver used to coordinate their reaving, and Vale watched her do the most dangerous thing she had done all night, which was to make herself heard. "I'm going to give her the one thing that makes turning around look like wisdom instead of defeat. I'm going to let her understand exactly what beat her, so she can go home and tell everyone that the silence is over, which is the only thing that's going to keep every other clan on the frontier from trying this again next month." The raider band crackled, and a voice came back across it that Vale felt in the base of his skull before the translator rendered it. A low, layered, resonant thing, the Ver matriarch speaking through the chitin plates of her own throat, a sound built to carry across a hunting dark. "Small ship," Gesh said. "Small quiet ship that killed my hulls. You are the ears." "I'm the ears," Wren said. "You will tell me how." It was not a question. The tide that did not turn did not ask. "You will tell me how a soft thing on a dead ship saw my hulls in the dark, or I will bring my last 7 down on you, and we will learn whether your ears can stop guns at knife range." "You already know they can't stop guns at knife range," Wren said. "You watched 2 of your hulls kill each other trying. You've got 7 left out of 19, and you know that if you bring them down my line, I'll hear you fill and the guns will be waiting and you'll go home with none. You're not threatening me, Gesh. You're asking me to give you a reason not to." She paused. "So here's the reason. You want to know how. I'll tell you how. Because you telling everyone how is the only thing that ends this, without your whole clan feeding itself into these guns one raid at a time." There was a silence on the raider band. "Your coils are silent," Wren said. "You've built your whole clan on it, generations of it, the drive that makes no sound until it burns, the raid whose first warning is the raid. And it's true, your coils are silent." She let it sit. "To you, to the conquered, to every instrument anybody out here ever built. But the winding hums when it fills, Gesh. Low. Lower than your people here, lower than the Saith here, in a register everybody in this galaxy evolved to ignore because on every civilized world it's just noise. Everybody except me. I come from a world so loud that we hear the thing under the noise, the low strain before the break, because on my world the low strain before the break is the sound of the ground opening or the water coming or the thing in the dark deciding to take you. We grew up hearing your coils fill. We just never had a reason to be out here listening until now. The Ver matriarch was silent for a long moment. One world, Gesh said at last. One soft, loud world, all of you hear this. All of us, Ren said. Everyone, I'm not special, Gesh. I'm just the first one you met. And that's the thing you need to carry home because it's true and because it's the only thing that saves your clan. The silence is over, not for me, for humans. There's a whole planet of us and every one of us hears the wire pull tight, and the day the conquered works out it needs our ears, they're going to be all over this frontier, and any clan still betting its life on a silent coil is betting on a thing that stopped being true tonight. You came out here to prove the coil still works. It doesn't. Go home and tell them it doesn't. That's not me beating you. That's me telling you the truth so your daughters don't die learning it one hull at a time. Vale watched the tactical plot, empty as ever, and imagined the 7 cold hulls holding in the dark around a matriarch doing the last and hardest arithmetic of her long reaving life. You could have let us come, Gesh said slowly. Let my 7 light and die in your guns and taken the whole reaving. Why do you tell me this instead? Because I don't want your 7 hulls, Ren said. I never wanted your hulls. I wanted the people on my pier to stop burning. Killing you doesn't do that. Some other clan just tries it next month. You going home and telling every clan on the frontier that the silence is dead, that does that. That's the win. You're not my enemy, Gesh. You're my messenger. You just didn't know it when you came. A beat. Take your 7 and go. I'll hear you the whole way out. If a single coil so much as starts to fill, I'll know and the guns will know and we're done talking. But if you just leave, I let you leave. That's the deal. I decide who I warn and I decide who I let go home. Tonight I'm letting you go home. The silence stretched. Vale did not breathe. Then one by one, in the dark that no instrument could read, 7 cold Ver hulls lit their steering jets. Not their coils, their jets, small and slow and turning. And the tide that did not turn, turned and drew off into the deep dark, and did not fill a single drive as it went. Ren listened to them go for a long time, all the way out, past the edge of her range, until the last whisper of the last steering jet was gone, and there was nothing left in her sky but the skiff's half-beat pump and the dead courier cooling, and the doctor breathing beside her. They're gone, she said, all the way gone. It's over. And then, for the first time in the whole long night, something went out of her, some held thing, and she put her face in her hands, not weeping, Vale thought. The Seleni word did not fit her, but the simple collapse of a body that has held perfect stillness for 6 hours because stillness was the only thing between it and death. God, doctor, that's a lot of dead people. 11 hulls, you're 6 on the courier. She did not look up. I heard every one of them. That's the part nobody's going to understand. I heard them all die. Vale put one of his 4 hands on her shoulder, carefully, the way he had learned humans could be touched, and said the only true thing he had. You heard them, he said, so that the people on the pier would not have to. That is what the sense is for. That is what it was always for on your loud world and on this one, not to make you strong, to make you the one who hears it coming so the others do not have to. He was quiet a moment. You did not make this dark, Ren. You are only the one who could hear across it. Do not carry the weight of the ones who came to kill you. Carry the 12 who walked down the stair. Ren was quiet for a long time. Then she lifted her head and wiped her face with the back of a dirt-flecked hand and keyed the relay to the port. Provost, she said, flat again, level again, the manifest read clean. It's Sable, it's over. Bring us home. The skiff came into Halkut Reach in the last of the frontier night, on its slow, honest chemical drive, and it made all the ordinary dumb sounds of burning fuel the whole way in. and Ren Sable heard every one of them and did not have to throw a single one away. And Vale thought she looked, for the length of that quiet return, almost at peace. A person who had been, for 6 hours, exactly and only what she was, in a place where being it was enough. The peace lasted until the airlock, where Adjudicator Osmi was waiting. The scholar had 4 hands folded into her gray robes, and an expression Vale had learned to read as the Selene-adjacent stillness of a mind that has been badly wrong, and has not yet decided what to do about it. Behind her stood 2 board security and the tech who had, 3 hours earlier, watched the board's courier carrying, per every remote instrument, a human asset with a steady pulse and respiration, break open to the dark and die. "The courier is destroyed," Osmi said without preamble. 6 crew dead. The passenger med monitor reported the asset's vitals ceasing at the moment of hull breach. The board spent 2 hours believing Miss Sable was dead. Her flat scholar's eyes moved from Vale to the small dirt-flecked human beside him, alive, breathing, dirt under her nails. And she is not, because she was never aboard. Because a physician and a provost decoyed a conquered vessel, disobeyed a board determination, and staked a strategic asset and 6 volunteer lives on an unauthorized engagement in the deep dark. Osmi's voice did not rise. It did not need to. You will all 3 understand that this is no longer a matter of licensure. 11 raider hulls dead, said Provost Sale, arriving down the pier ramp in her pressure column, her mantle the flat committed gray. The reaving broken. The clan mother Gesh turned and running for the deep frontier, carrying word to every clan she passes that the coil is no longer silent. That is the engagement the board is calling unauthorized, adjudicator. I authorized it. I will answer for the 6. I have already flown their flag. But you will not stand in my airlock and reduce what happened out there to a licensure matter, because 6 of my people bought it with their lives, and I will not have it made small. Osmi regarded the provost for a long moment. You believe the size of the victory absolves the disobedience, the scholar said. I believe, Sale said, that the board's determination would have put the only being that has ever hurt the Ver on a slow ship down a fixed lane, exactly where the clan wanted her, and that if we had obeyed it, Miss Sable would be in a Ver hold right now and my port would be mourning her instead of 6 volunteers, and the coil would still be silent, and every clan on the frontier would still believe the dark was theirs. I believe the board's careful, protective, entirely reasonable determination was going to get her killed and lose the frontier the single greatest advantage it has been handed in a generation. So no, adjudicator, I do not believe the victory absolves the disobedience. I believe the disobedience was the victory. There is a difference, and you are a scholar, so you will feel it. Adjudicator Osmi did not answer at once. She was a scholar. She felt the difference, exactly as Sale had said she would, and Vale watched her feel it, watched the careful mind walk the corridor and arrive, this time, at a door that was not locked. You will all submit to inquiry, Osmi said at last. That is not negotiable. 6 are dead, and the board does not overlook its dead any more than the provost overlooks hers. But she turned, fully, to Ren. The determination that brought me here was built on a premise, Miss Sable. The premise was that you are a sensory capability that can be studied, contained, and in time reproduced, that if the board brought you to the Institute and gave its finest minds enough years, it could learn to give the conquered what you do. That premise is the whole justification for taking you. I have spent the night watching the premise die. The scholar's 4 hands unfolded. You did not use an instrument out there. You used a thing you are. And when the clan mother asked you how, you told her the truth, on an open band, where the board recorded every word, that you are not special, that there is a whole world of you, that every human, correctly healed, hears the wire pull tight. Osmi was very still, which means there is nothing at the Institute to study. There is no capability to extract from one human and bottle. There is only a species the survey graded unfit for contact 80 years ago and closed the file on. And the board cannot confiscate a species, Miss Sable. It can only, at last, go and ask. That's what I told the provost a week ago, Wren said. It took the whole galaxy a night to catch up. She was tired. Vale could hear it even if the board could not, the flatness gone thin at the edges. I'm not an asset adjudicator. I never was. I'm a person from a loud world who got her ears fixed by a good doctor and turned out to hear the thing that's been killing your frontier for a generation. You can put me through your inquiry. You can write me up for the Courier and the Six, and I'll answer for the Six too. They were mine as much as the provost's. I sent them out as bait, and I'll carry that the rest of my life. But you can't study me into a solution because I'm not the solution. Earth is. And the day you're ready to stop grading my planet and start asking it for help, you know where to find us. She almost smiled, that small grim flex. We're loud. You won't be able to miss us. Osmi looked at the human for a long moment, and then she did the thing that Vale had not expected and would remember as the true turning of the night, larger even than the tide that turned in the dark. She inclined her head, the scholar's gesture, the acknowledgement of a fact that has proven itself against every prior model. The inquiry will proceed, she said. You will not be transferred to the Institute. There is no longer a coherent basis for it, and I will say so in my finding. What happens after the inquiry is above my authority and above the provost's. It will be decided by beings who have never been to a frontier port and never heard a coil fill, and will spend a year arguing about a thing you settled tonight in the dark. But whatever they decide, and here the careful scholar paused and chose her words the way Vale chose sutures, they will be deciding it about a species now and not a girl. You have made yourself impossible to own, Miss Sable, by proving you were never rare. It is the most elegant defense I have encountered in 40 years of adjudication, and I do not believe you planned it, which makes it more elegant still. She turned to go, then stopped. Dr. Vale, your credential is not in jeopardy. You healed a patient to her own baseline. The board will find that the baseline was simply larger than the Concord's catalog. I would suggest, for the record, that you file an amended entry for the human sensory ceiling. It appears the surveys was wrong by a considerable margin. It appears, Vale said, that the survey has been wrong about a great many things regarding Earth. Yes, said adjudicator Osmi, dry to the last. It does rather appear that way. And she gathered her security and her tech and went to write the finding that would, over the slow grinding year to come, begin the process by which the Meridian Concord stopped treating a grade 16 world as a hazard to be avoided, and started treating it as a neighbor whose ears it very badly needed. The story got out, the way stories did on a frontier where every crew that touched a port carried its gossip to the next one, and it got out in the shape Wren had built for it, because she had told Gesh the truth on an open band and Gesh had carried it into the deep frontier, and the board had recorded it, and the recording had, inevitably, leaked. Within a month, the tale of the night the silence died at Halkut Reach had reached ports Vale had never heard of, and it had changed, in the telling, into something larger and simpler than the truth, which was that there was a world of soft, loud creatures who could hear a coil fill in the dark, and that betting your clan's life on a silent drive was now a way to die. The practical effects were not simple at all. Vale, who read everything, watched them arrive one dry document at a time. The actuarial tables for the frontier lanes, which had priced every berth and every cargo on the assumption that a coil raid could not be foreseen, began to be rewritten, because a single human on a single port had foreseen 20 of them, and the beings who set the price of risk did not care about heroism but cared very much about a variable that had changed. The patrol doctrine shifted. The authority began, quietly, to station its ready guns not where its instruments said threats would come, but where its models of a human's hearing said a raider would try to hide, and the models were crude and the human was one and irreplaceable, but the shape of the thing had changed. And under all of it, in the slow grinding machinery of the Concord's core, a question had been opened that could not be closed again. What else had the survey been wrong about, regarding the loud world it had graded unfit and filed away? Wren, for her part, went back to work. That was the thing about her that Vale never stopped finding remarkable. She did not become a legend, or refused to, which on a frontier amounted to the same thing. She let the board conduct its inquiry. She answered every question flatly and took her share of the weight for the six, and did not flinch from it. And when the inquiry closed with a finding that no one was entirely happy with and everyone could live with, she did not go to the Corps, and she did not take a commission, and she did not let the authority put her in a chair and point her. She negotiated with Provost Sale in the low light of the provost's office, the only arrangement she had ever wanted, and it was the same deal she had offered from the first night, unchanged. She would listen for Halkut reach. She would hear the coils fill and the valves fail and the couplings strain, and she would warn the pier and the guns when it came to guns. And she would decide who she warned and where she stood when she did it, and the authority would give her a gallery over the apron and a canteen of flat water and leave her the hell alone. And if the board and the Corps did not like a strategic capability that answered to its own conscience instead of to an order, the board and the Corps could come out to the frontier and hear a coil fill for itself, and then explain to her how it ought to be done. They will never be comfortable with it, Sale said, when the arrangement was made. An asset that cannot be commanded, it goes against everything the conquered is built on. I'm not an asset, Wren said, for what Vale counted as the 40th time. I'm a cargo hand with good ears who agreed to sit on your gallery. The day you start treating that like something you own is the day I go home to a whole planet full of people who hear exactly what I hear, and then you can negotiate with all of them at once. She screwed the cap on her canteen. You'll be more comfortable with me than with that provost. Trust me, I'm the easy version. Provost Sale's mantle went through a slow shift that Vale had, over the months, finally learned to read, and it was not unease, and it was not the predator's freeze. It was, he was fairly sure, the nearest a saith came to something like respect for a current stronger than her own. Yes, the provost said, I am beginning to understand that you are. The ones who came for her next did not use a coil at all. It was 7 weeks after the dark, on an ordinary gold afternoon, and Wren was on her gallery with her boots on the rail when she heard the wrong silence. That was how she described it to Vale afterward, and it was the phrase that finally made the doctor understand that he had spent all this time thinking about her sense backward. He had thought of her as a coal detector, a thing that herd drives fill. She was not. She was a threat detector from a world where everything was a threat, and what she heard was not the coil. What she heard was the shape of the noise, the whole living sound of the port, and anything that put a hole in it. There's a ship that isn't making any sound, she said, sitting up, in a place where there should be a ship making sound. That is most ships, Vale said. He had taken to spending his afternoons on the gallery. He told himself it was to monitor his patient's neurological adaptation, and it was partly true, and it was mostly that he had come to find the company of the one being in the galaxy who lived inside the pure register a strange kind of rest. Ships are quiet until they burn. You taught me that. No, Wren's head was tipped, the listening animal tilt. A cold ship still makes sound. Hull ticks as it heats and cools. Attitude jets breathe. The crew moves around inside. You don't think metal carries that, but it does. Footfalls, a hatch, a dropped tool. Every cold ship in this port is quietly full of little sounds if you know how to listen past the loud ones. Her jaw shifted. There's one out on the far transit ring that isn't. It's making the sounds a ship makes when nobody wants it to make any sound at all. When the crew's moving slow and soft and everything's been padded and stilled on purpose. It's a ship being quiet the way I'm quiet. And I only know one reason to make a ship that quiet. She stood. It's a hunting ship. And it's not filling a coil because it already worked out that a coil's the one thing I'd hear. It came in cold on a gravity coast, no drive, nothing to fill. It's been drifting toward this port for probably 2 days, making itself into a hole in the noise. And it's about to put people onto the ring, and those people are coming for the gallery. Vale was already reaching for the relay. The provost. Tell her, but she can't stop this one with guns. You can't shoot a boarding team on your own transit ring without killing the ring. Wren was moving now, unhurried but moving, down off the gallery toward the transit spine, and Vale went with her because the alternative was to let her go alone. Somebody paid for this, Doctor. This isn't a clan proving a point. This is professionals, cold and quiet and good, and somebody in the Corps or the corporate lanes decided the cheapest way to put the silence back is to make the one set of ears that broke it stop hearing. She said it flatly, walking, a woman reading a manifest of her own assassination. Which tells you something, actually. It tells you it worked. It tells you I mattered enough that somewhere there's a ledger where killing me was the responsible line item. She almost smiled. That's the most anybody's ever thought of a cargo hand with good ears. They were Sether. Vale saw them clearly only once, later when it was done. Tall, dry-skinned mercenaries with the yellow glowing eyes of a species that hunted in the lightless deep of their own world. A crew that hired out to whoever paid and prided itself, its reputation said, on jobs that left no sound and no witness. 6 of them came off the cold ship onto the far transit ring in soft-soled boots and matte gear, moving the way professionals moved, spread and silent. And they had planned the approach with real care, and they had gotten exactly one thing wrong, which was that they had built their whole method on silence against a target for whom silence was the loudest thing in the world. Wren heard all 6 the moment they cracked the ring's airlock. She heard the seal break, the pressure equalize, the first soft boot on the deck plate, and she stopped in the transit spine and put her back to a bulkhead and closed her eyes and simply listened. And Vale watched her build, out of 6 sets of careful silent footfalls, a complete map of 6 killers moving through a port she knew by heart. 2 are coming up the spine toward us, she murmured, barely a breath. 2 took the maintenance crawl to come around behind. One's holding the airlock. One's gone up toward the gallery the fast way to be there when I'm driven up to it. They plan to push me toward my own gallery and take me there. That's good planning. They studied me. A pause. They studied where I sit. They didn't study how I hear. Wren, Vale breathed. There are 6. We have to reach the Provost's people. The Provost's people are 8 minutes away and moving loud, and the Sether will hear them coming and kill me and be gone before they arrive, Wren said. 8 minutes is a lifetime, Doctor. I've got a lifetime. Listen. She opened her eyes. You're going to walk normally, not fast, back up the spine toward the medical bay, making the ordinary amount of noise a doctor makes, and you're going to be a distraction that isn't a distraction, just a soft target moving away, drawing the 2 behind us to follow the loud thing. And I'm going to be the quiet thing they lose. Because the one advantage a killer who works in silence has never once had to plan for is a target who's better at silence than he is. Vale did not want to leave her. He did it anyway because she had never once been wrong about the dark, and because the alternative was to make noise beside her and get them both killed. He walked up the spine at a doctor's pace, and behind him, exactly as she had said, he heard it in the taut quiet, the soft redirection of 2 sets of footfalls following the loud, obvious thing. And Wren's sable went the other way, into the maintenance crawl, into the dark and the padded silence where the Sether had thought they owned the ground, and she hunted the hunters in the one place in the galaxy she was never at a disadvantage. A confined space, in the dark, where the only thing that mattered was who could hear whom first. Vale did not see what happened in the crawl. Almost no one ever did see what Wren did. That was the shape of her, the thing the board had never been able to catalog. He heard it, though, second-hand, in the report sales security pieced together afterward from the aftermath and the one surviving Sether, and it was not a battle, because Wren's sable did not fight battles. It was a series of quiet, procedural, entirely one-sided encounters in the dark, in which 6 professional killers who had built their reputations on being unheard discovered, one at a time, in the last confused second of their certainty, that the small soft target had been standing beside them in the black for some time, listening, waiting for the moment the arithmetic came out clean, and that she was already moving before they knew she was there. It was not clean, and it was not free. When Vale found her, 20 minutes later, in the low dark of the maintenance crawl with sales security finally arriving loud and late behind him, she was sitting with her back against a conduit and one hand pressed flat to her side, and between her fingers was a slow dark wetness, and her face was gray under the dirt. The fifth Sether, the one who had gone up to wait at the gallery, had doubled back when the spine went quiet, and he had been good, and he had gotten a blade into her before she heard the one sound a killer could not fully suppress, which was the small involuntary catch of his own breath in the instant before he committed. She had heard it a half-second late. A half-second on her world was usually enough. It had been almost enough here. "Don't," she said as Vale dropped beside her with his 4 hands already moving. "It's not as bad as it looks. Missed the important parts. I heard him in time to turn, just not in time to turn all the way." She breathed carefully. 5 down, 1 left, the one who held the airlock. He ran the second the others stopped answering. "He's on the cold ship. It's pulling off the ring right now, cold, no coil, running for the deep." A thin, gray almost smile. "Let him. I want him to run. I want him to get all the way home to whoever paid for this, and tell them what I told Gesh, that you can't out-silence a human. That the whole idea, the whole clever, expensive idea that you could just make me stop hearing, died in a crawlspace on Halcut Reach with 5 of the best quiet killers money could buy." Her eyes found Vale's. "Somebody in the Corps paid for this, Doctor, somebody with a ledger, and they're going to get their one survivor back, and their survivor's going to tell them it can't be done, and that's worth more than killing him. That's the message getting home." "Stop talking," Vale said, working, "and let me do the one thing I am actually good at." She stopped talking. She let him work. It was, he thought later, the first time she had ever fully let him. The first time the small, self-contained human had simply put herself in another being's hands and trusted him to do the thing he was for, and he understood it for the gift it was, and he did not waste it. He was a very good doctor. He had, after all, once healed this human past every ceiling the conquered catalogued by accident, and it had changed the frontier. He healed her again now, on purpose, in a crawlspace, and this time he changed nothing except that she lived, and it was the finest work of his life for the second time. The Sether survivor reached the deep frontier and reported, as Wren had known he would, that the contract was impossible, and the ledger in the Corps that had carried her death as a responsible line item was quietly closed, because the beings who kept such ledgers were not sentimental, but they were not fools, and a capability that had defeated a raider clan and a professional kill crew in the same season was a capability you stopped trying to erase and started trying, however grudgingly, to accommodate. Provost Sale traced the contract as far as it could be traced, which was not all the way. It dissolved, as such things did, into a shell of brokers and cut out somewhere in the corporate lanes of the Corps, where certain interests had calculated that the old world of silent coils and unforeseeable raids had been, for them, a profitable order, and that the human who had ended it was cheaper to remove than to live with. They had been wrong about the price. That was the finding Sale filed, and it was blunt and it was true. The interests who preferred the old silence had learned that the new order was not a person who could be removed. It was a fact about the galaxy that had already gotten out, and you could not assassinate a fact. "They will try other things," Sale told Wren in the medical bay 3 days later, while Vale changed the dressing on a wound that was healing with the alarming speed the doctor had come to expect of her loud world biology. "Not this. This failed too publicly. But there will be legal instruments, licensing challenges, quiet pressures on the port, attempts to make you a conquered office instead of a conquered threat. The Corps does not give up. It only changes register." "Let it," Wren said. She was eating, one-handed, a bowl of the port's flat grain porridge, because Vale had told her she needed the fuel to heal, and she had decided to be a cooperative patient for approximately 1 meal. "Every register they change to is one where I win the same way. They want to license me, fine. I'll hear for whoever's on the pier, and they can call that a license if it makes the paperwork happy. They want to make me an office, fine. The office decides who it warns, same as I always have. They want to pressure the port, she took a bite. The port's got one thing the whole Corps wants now, which is a working example of a human who hears the dark, and they're not going to trade that away to make some broker in the Corps comfortable. I'm not hard to beat because I'm dangerous, Provost. I'm hard to beat because there's nothing to grab. You can't confiscate a sense. You can't assassinate a species. And every clever being who tries figures that out about a week after I already told them. She almost smiled. I keep telling them. Nobody believes the small, quiet one until it's too late to bet against her. Adjudicator Osmi came back to Halkut Reach in the spring of the following frontier year, and this time she did not come to certify a graft or contain an asset. She came, she said, as the carrier of a question the Corps had spent the winter failing to avoid, and the question was the one Wren had named on the first night in the Provost's office and again to a raider matriarch in the dark. And it was this: whether the Meridian Conquered might formally approach the world it had catalogued as Grade 16, hazard name clamor, and ask. The survey file has been reopened, Osmi told them in the medical bay, with the dry precision of a scholar reporting the collapse of a model she had personally defended for 40 years. Not amended, reopened. There is a difference. An amendment corrects an error. A reopening admits the file was never adequate to its subject. The note the surveyors appended 80 years ago, contact discouraged, colonization unadvised, is being read now, by beings who have watched what happened here, as the single most expensive error of judgment in the Conquered's frontier history. We graded a world unfit for contact because it was too loud. It has taken us 80 years and one healed patient to understand that we did not grade a hazard. We graded an ally, and then we filed it, and every dock worker who has burned in a coil raid in 80 years burned partly because we could not imagine that loud meant capable. She folded her 4 hands. The Corps does not enjoy learning this, but the Corps is not a fool, and the arithmetic, as you told me, Miss Sable, is real. A Conquered that can hear the coil fill is a Conquered in which the frontier does not bleed, and the only place to obtain that Conquered is Earth. So we are going to ask. Wren, healed now, back on light duty, sat with her boots not quite on the rail because the doctor had forbidden it and she had compromised, and she listened to the scholar with the same loose, complete attention she gave the dark. They're not going to give you what you want, she said, not unkindly. You're going to go to Earth expecting to negotiate for a capability, a resource, some ears you can requisition, and Earth's going to look at you the way you looked at me the first night, like you're a thing that doesn't understand what it's asking for, because it's not a resource adjudicator, it's people. Billions of them, all of them hearing the dark, all of them with their own lives and their own reasons. And the day the Conquered shows up asking to borrow their ears is the day the Conquered stops being the thing that grades worlds and starts being one voice among many asking a very old, very loud, very capable species for a favor. She almost smiled. You're not going to acquire us. You're going to meet us. It's going to be the most uncomfortable thing that ever happened to the Corps, and it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to this frontier. And both of those are going to be true at once for about 50 years. Osmi regarded her for a long moment. You describe it, the scholar said, as though you will not be there to see it. I'm a cargo hand with good ears who likes a gallery over a working port, Wren said. The diplomats and the envoys and the first contact people, that's somebody else's job, and thank God. I did my part. I heard the thing that needed hearing and I told the truth about it to the people who needed to hear it, a raider and an adjudicator and a provost, and now the truth's out and it's too big for anybody to put back. That's enough. That's the whole thing I ever wanted, not to be special, just to be believed in time. She looked out at the apron, at the 100 crews working the 100 cradles in the going gold light. Let the Corps go meet Earth. I'll be here. Somebody's got to keep listening to this port. The first other humans reached Halkut Reach before the envoys ever reached Earth. They came not as a delegation, but as what humans apparently were, out in the wide galaxy, a work crew. 3 of them, on a battered independent hauler that had heard the story 2 ports back and diverted to see if it was true, because the human community on the frontier was small and scattered, and it had reasons of its own to want to know whether one of its own had really done the thing the story said. They were nothing like Wren and exactly like her, a tall, broad woman who ran cargo rigs, a wiry older man who fixed drives, a young one barely more than a child who did whatever the other 2 told him, all of them done and scarred and ordinary and utterly unremarkable to look at. And Vale watched them come down the ramp onto the apron and felt the small hairs of his crest stand up, because for the first time he was seeing not one Loud World native but a group of them. And the group did a thing the individual had never quite let him see. They arrived, and within a minute of setting foot on the apron, all 3 of them paused, not together, not on a signal, just each in their own moment, and tipped their heads a half-degree, the listening animal tilt, and one of them, the older man, frowned at the sky and said to no one, "Somebody's got a coil about half charged out past the transit ring. Patrol boat holding. That normal here." And the broad woman said, "Probably. Loud port." And the young one said nothing but was already looking, without being told, in exactly the direction the sound had come from. They all heard it, every one of them. A capability the Conquered had spent a season deciding was a strategic anomaly worth a laboratory and an assassination, and 3 random human dock workers off a battered hauler had it as casually as breathing, and used it to note a patrol boat and move on with their afternoon. Wren came down to meet them. Vale watched the 4 of them stand together on the apron in the gold light, 4 small, ordinary Loud World creatures, dirt under all their nails, and he watched them not make a fuss of each other, because that too was apparently a human thing, the not making a fuss, and he heard the broad woman say, "So it was you. The Halcut ears." "It was me," Wren said. "Heard you took a knife for it. Healed up. Heard the Corps going to Earth to ask for more of us. That's the story." The broad woman looked at Wren for a while, and then she looked around at the port, at the daylit apron and the working crews and the safe security and the whole strange alien machinery of the conquered frontier, and she said the thing that Vale would carry for the rest of his life as the truest summary of what his accidental healing had set loose in the galaxy. "Long way to come," the woman said, "to find out they need us to hear for them. My whole life they graded our world a hazard. Now they're going to come asking us to listen." She shook her head, and there was no triumph in it, only the flat human amusement of someone who has watched a certainty invert. "Loud Planet finally came in handy. Who'd have thought it?" "Nobody," Wren said. "That was always the problem." Dr. Vale filed the amended entry, in the end, exactly as Osme had suggested, and he took an unprofessional satisfaction in the writing of it. He had spent 30 years filing entries, sensory ceilings, graph tolerances, the dry catalog of what a given species could and could not perceive. He had never once expected to file one that overturned a survey. But he sat in his rebuilt medical bay, with the long window replaced and the noon sun coming through it flat and pale across the apron, and he wrote the correction to the human auditory ceiling, and he wrote it in full, with the timestamps and the peer logs and the 2 engagements appended as evidence. And at the bottom, in the field reserved for the filing physician's remarks, he wrote a single line that would outlive him in the Concord's records, that some scholar 100 years on would read and pause over. The subject was not enhanced. The subject was healed. The distinction is the whole of the matter, and the Concord's failure to grasp it for 80 years is the whole of the cost. He read it back twice, and he did not soften it, because he had climbed too many times on her account now to stop climbing, and because it was true. Wren found him at it, on one of her gallery afternoons that had become, without either of them quite deciding it, gallery and medical bay afternoons, the human and the doctor keeping a companionable distance across the pure register that they were, for different reasons, the only 2 beings on the port who lived inside. "You're writing about me again," she said from the doorway. She could hear it, of course, the particular rhythm of his four hands at the console, the way the entry fields chimed as he filled them. "I am writing about a healed patient," Vale said, "and correcting the record of a conquered that graded her people a hazard." The two happened to be the same document. Wren came and read it over his shoulder, which she was allowed to do, which no one else was, and she got to the last line and was quiet for a moment. "The subject was not enhanced," she read. "The subject was healed." She looked at him. "You still feel bad about it, that you did more than you meant to, that you gave me back more than I lost." "I feel," Vale said carefully, "that I performed a routine reconstruction and set loose a change in the order of the galaxy, and that a physician is not trained for that, and that I would do it again without hesitation, and that all three of those are true at once and will be for the rest of my life." He turned from the console. "You asked me once if you regretted it. I never told you my own answer. I do not regret healing you, Wren. I regret only that it took so much from you to be the one who hears the 6 on the courier, the knife in the crawl, the sound of 11 hulls dying in the dark that you will carry when I am long gone. I gave you your world's own ears back, and your world's own ears are a hard thing to carry in a quiet galaxy. That is the part I would spare you if I could, and cannot." Wren was quiet for a while. "You know what the trade is out where I come from," she said at last. "The trade for hearing everything." She tapped the side of her head. "You never get to not know. Everybody else on this port gets to sit in the sun and think the dark is empty. I don't. I hear it's not, all the time, every day, the whole living noise of it, and most of it's nothing. A patrol boat holding a charge, a valve I'll flag for service, a hauler crew arguing 3 piers over, but I hear it. And every so often under all of it there's the one wrong sound." She shrugged. "That's the trade. You gave me back the ears, and the ears come with never getting to think the dark is empty. It's not your fault, Doctor, it's the price of the sense. It always was on my world. You just gave me back the true version of it." She almost smiled. "Besides, somebody's got to hear it, might as well be somebody who's used to it." It became, over the following year, the most ordinary thing on Halkut Reach, which was the strangest part of all. The arrangement held. The Corps sent its envoys toward Earth, and the diplomats argued their 50 years' worth of arguments somewhere far away, and none of it changed the shape of Wren Sable's days, which were spent on a gallery over a working port with her boots almost on the rail and a canteen of flat water beside her, listening. The port had, without ceremony, reorganized itself around her the way a body reorganizes itself around a returned sense. The pier crews had learned to keep a working channel open for the array. The authority guns had learned to trust a traverse order that came before there was anything to see. The insurers had rewritten their tables, and the price of a berth at Halkut Reach had fallen, because Halkut Reach was, alone among the frontier ports, a place where the coil was not silent, and cargo went where the risk was low. And so the port that had nearly burned in a coil raid became, on the strength of one healed patient, the safest working port on the frontier and one of the busiest. Wren took none of the credit and all of the shifts. She was, Vale thought, constitutionally incapable of being a hero and entirely capable of being useful, and she had arranged her life so that the second thing never once tipped over into the first. The raiders learned. Not all at once and not all of them. There were always new clans, new crews, new confident beings who had heard the story and decided the story was exaggerated, that no soft creature could really hear a coil fill, that Halkut Reach had simply gotten lucky twice. They came and Wren heard them fill, and the guns were waiting, and they died or they ran, and the ones who ran carried the story further and made it truer, until the frontier arrived, clan by clan and crew by crew, at the simple operational fact that you did not raid the port with the ears. Not because the port was strong, because the port could not be surprised, and a raid that could not surprise was a raid that only fed itself into waiting guns, and even the boldest reaver did the arithmetic eventually. A few of them tried to be clever about it, and the clever ones interested Wren more than the bold ones, because the clever ones were the future. A tribal crew came in once towing a string of derelict hulls on cold tethers, thinking to hide a live coil among a dozen dead ones, so that when it filled she could not tell the armed hull from the junk. She listened to the whole ugly flotilla drift in and told the guns, calmly, which of the 12 was the one whose winding had begun to sing, and only that one. And the crew never understood how she had picked a single filling coil out of a cloud of debris, because they had built their trick on the assumption that more noise would hide the signal, and had never once considered that to a being from a loud world, hiding a signal in noise was the oldest problem there was, and the whole of what her ears were for. Another crew tried filling their coils in short pulses, winding a little and stopping, winding a little and stopping, hoping the broken rhythm would slip under her notice. She heard the gaps. The gaps were as loud to her as the winding. A being who had grown up parsing the pause between a predator's breaths did not lose a coil in a stutter. She logged each new trick and told the doctor about them, and the doctor understood that he was watching the opening moves of an arms race that would run for a century. The raiders inventing new silences, the humans hearing through them, on, because that was the shape of it now, and would be for as long as anything hunted anything in the dark. But she was never worried, and when Vale asked her why, she said the thing that stayed with him, that you could invent a new silence every year for 1,000 years, and it would never once beat a species that had spent its entire evolution learning that silence itself had a shape, and that the shape of a silence where there should be sound was the most dangerous sound of all. The afternoon had ended, the afternoon Vale marked privately, as the day he understood what he had truly done was an ordinary one. Wren was on her gallery. Vale was in the medical bay below, with the window open to the flat noon light, doing the ordinary work of a port physician, a cargo hand's crushed hand, a Saith's pressure rig abrasion, the small routine violences of a working place. He heard, over the working channel he now kept open the way he kept his own heart's beating, the human's voice, calm and level, and reading a manifest. Provost, Sable, one coil far out past the third moon filling slow. A pause, just one, filling careful, slow, quiet as they can make it, which tells me they know about the ears and they're trying to sneak a single hull in under my range by winding it as gently as possible. Another pause, and Vale, working, smiled to himself, because he could hear in her voice the thing the raiders never learned in time, which was that there was no gently that a loud world native could not hear. It won't matter. Slow fill's still a fill. I've got them. Call it 11 minutes to ignition, single hull coming down the northern approach. You've got all the time in the world on this one. Might as well finish your lunch, Provost. I'll tell you when to point the guns. And Provost Sale's voice came back over the channel, dry, and Vale heard in it the thing that a year had built between the officer and the array, which was not affection. The Saith did not do affection, but something better, something like the ease of two competent beings who no longer had to prove anything to each other. I intend to, the Provost said. Tell me when. Vale set down his instruments and went to the window and looked up, past the gantries and the daylight panels, at the pale flat sky over Halcut Reach, empty as it always was, empty as it had been the very first afternoon when a human had told him a cradle was not as empty as his scanner said. 11 minutes. Somewhere past the third moon, a single hull was winding its coil as gently as its crew knew how, certain as its kind was always certain, that it came in silence. And on a gallery over a working port, a small dirt-flecked woman with her boots almost on the rail had already heard it, had already counted it, had already told the guns they had all the time in the world. He thought about the entry he had filed. The subject was not enhanced, the subject was healed. He thought about the 411 beings whose hearing he had restored across 30 years. Every one of them made a little more like their own kind, and the one he had made stranger by accident, who had turned out to be exactly like her own kind after all, and had changed the order of the galaxy by being what a loud world made and a good doctor gave back. The single hull lit its coil 11 minutes later. exactly when Wren had said on the northern approach, exactly where she had said, and the authority guns were already tracking it, and it died in the middle of its burn, and no one on Halkut Reach heard it die except the woman on the gallery, who heard everything, and who logged it in the flat place where she kept such things and did not pretend it was a victory and did not pretend it was nothing. Then she screwed the cap on her canteen and put her boots up on the rail, all the way up this time, because the doctor was busy and would not see, and she went back to listening to the port, the freighters and the fuel sledges and the grav plating and the 1,000 ordinary sounds of a working place that would, tonight and every night, sleep easier than any port on the frontier, because somewhere above it in the daylight, one small person from a loud world was awake in the noise, hearing the dark, so that no one else had to. Vale watched her from the window for a while. Then he went back to the crushed hand and the abraded rig and the small routine work of keeping a working port working, which was, he had come to understand, the same work the human did, only louder and slower, and one patient at a time. Below the gallery the port ran on into the going gold afternoon. Above it the sky stayed empty, and a woman who could hear it was not listened to it, and found, in the whole vast living noise of it, nothing yet worth the trouble of a word. That was the arrangement it held, it holds still.